to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News. What matters to you?
I'm Jim Browdy, head on Boston Public Radio. We'll start the week again with economics, not the bond market, Marjorie. But many seem to have put vacation or restaurant spending on hold as the Trump-induced economic uncertainty continues. Are you eating home more, trying to save? Would you put that big vacation on hold? Please call or text.
I'm Marjorie Egan, and then it's food policy analyst Tufts Corby Kummer. What's really behind the Make America Healthy Again plan to cut SNAP benefits? And Education Secretary Linda McMahon seems confused. Is it AI or A1 sauce that she wants in schools? Is she talking about learning tools or giving you a nice ribeye medium rare? It's all ahead on Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Louise Schiavone. El Salvador's President Nayib Bukele meets with President Trump in Washington today. His country is now a key player in the Trump administration's tough line on people in the U.S. without legal status. Manuel Rueda has more.
President Bukele has said that for a fee, he can put his nation's prisons at the service of U.S. authorities. In March, El Salvador took in more than 100 Venezuelan migrants who were expelled from the U.S. in an expedited manner and locked them up in a massive prison filled with gang members. On Monday, Bukele and Trump are expected to discuss ways to expand this kind of partnership. Bukele could also be looking for ways to reduce tariffs on his nation's exports, while ensuring that Salvadorian immigrants can continue to work in the U.S. Almost a quarter of El Salvador's income comes from the remittances sent there by migrants. For NPR News, I'm Manuel Rueda, Bogotá, Colombia.
In Pennsylvania, a suspect is now in custody in connection with a fire set at the home of Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro early Sunday morning after the first night of Passover. NPR's Chandalise Duster has the latest.
Pennsylvania State Police say 38-year-old Cody Balmer broke into the governor's residence and set a fire around 2 a.m. with a homemade device before fleeing. Balmer was arrested Sunday afternoon in the Harrisburg area. The Dauphin County District Attorney says the office is preparing to charge Balmer with attempted murder, terrorism, aggravated arson, and aggravated assault. Governor Shapiro says he and his family were safely evacuated. Shapiro, who posted photos of his family's Seder table Saturday, said the incident will not stop him from celebrating Passover. Shapiro also called for an end to acts of violence. Chandalise Duster, NPR News.
Earlier today, South Korea's former President Yoon Suk-yeol appeared in court for the start of a trial on charges of insurrection after the country's constitutional court removed Yoon from office earlier this month. NPR's Anthony Kuhn reports from Seoul.
In court, prosecutors argued that Yoon had led an insurrection by declaring martial law last December 3rd and then sent troops to Parliament to prevent lawmakers from voting down his decree. Yoon has denied this, but one of the witnesses is a former military officer who testified during Yoon's impeachment trial that he was ordered to physically drag lawmakers out of Parliament. The pre-trial hearing for Yoon's insurrection case took place before he was removed from office, making him the first South Korean sitting president to face criminal charges. If convicted, Yoon could face death or life in prison. Presidential elections to replace Yoon are scheduled for June 3rd. Anthony Kuhn, NPR News, Seoul.
On Wall Street, the Dow Jones Industrial Average is up 428 points. The Nasdaq up 249. This is NPR.
Good morning. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. Authorities continue to investigate a plane crash that killed Karenna Goff, the former MIT soccer player, and several of her loved ones. Groff was traveling in a private plane with family members when that plane crashed Saturday afternoon in upstate New York, right along the Massachusetts line. Groff was headed to the Catskills with her dad, neuroscientist Michael Groff, her mom, Dr. Joy Sinai, and her boyfriend, James Santoro, no relation. Another MIT grad. Groff's brother and his girlfriend are also believed to have been on board that plane. This is National Transportation Safety Board member Todd Inman.
Our mission is to understand not just what happened, but why it happened, and to provide recommendations for it not to happen again.
Karina Groff, who was a two-time All-American at MIT, was named the NCAA's Woman of the Year in 2022. Her off-the-field efforts included work as an EMT, co-founding Open PPE, which aimed to address the shortage of personal protective equipment during the height of COVID. And an extended buffer zone surrounding the Dedham courthouse where Karen Reed's second trial is taking place will stay after a federal judge denied a lawsuit that sought to eliminate it on the grounds of free speech. In the lead-up to Reed's second trial, Norfolk Superior Court Judge Beverly Cannoni issued an order expanding the buffer zone around the courthouse at the request of prosecutors. Cannoni says she did it to prevent demonstrators outside the court from influencing the trial. 55 degrees in Boston. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Fisher Investments. Fisher is committed to helping clients stay on track to reach their financial goals and enjoy a comfortable retirement. FisherInvestments.com. Investing in securities involves the risk of loss.
Okay. He's Jim Browdy. I'm Marjorie. You may have noticed something a little bit different there. That's our new music. We had some copyright issues, so we have changed our music. I hope you get used to it. We kind of like it.
Yeah, we kind of like it.
Okay. We are streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We're going to be back at the Boston Public Library tomorrow with filmmakers Ken Burns and Sarah Botstein on the American Revolution and the shot heard 250 years ago this week. Hello, Jim.
A lot of people are asking, are they actually going to be there, Burns and Botstein?
Yes, they are.
The answer is yes,
Yep,
they are.
yep.
By the way, about our new music, an anonymous texter said the new opening music evokes feelings I didn't think I could ever experience.
Okay. All right,
That's pretty good.
Weisenheimer.
In any case,
You have to get used to it.
the middle class, and by the way, if you're wondering why we're not talking about the fact that the Trump administration says they have no obligation to bring back Abrego Garcia, and Trump's meeting with the president of El Salvador, just be patient. We're talking to Judge Nancy Gertner at noon,
Yes,
and
we
that will
are.
be a central topic. In the meantime, the middle-class restaurant is dying, according to the New York Times, and it's not just because of Trump's on-again, off-again tariffs. We talked before about the fast casual chains getting rid of dining rooms, filing for bankruptcy left and right. It's a market trend reflecting an economic reality. The middle class, more broadly, is being hollowed out in terms of food, more takeout, cooking at home, etc. And travelers say they're opting for smaller, closer to home vacations this year, as much out of concern for their wallets as for their peace of mind, as the perception of Americans around the world is obviously changing for the worse. So we're opening the lines this morning to talk about your, let's call it your leisure budget, if it even exists anymore. Are you spending money on recreation now, or are you tightening the belt in preparation for what may be ahead? How are you adjusting, or are you? 877-301-8970. I spoke to several restaurateurs who were friends of ours, by the way, over the weekend, in passing, whatever. Virtually everybody with whom I spoke said business is horrible, and
those aren't just like Bertucci's. They're like high-end restaurants.
Really high quality, yeah, mostly independent restaurants kind of thing, and most of it, and obviously part of it is worker issues and tariff issues, but a huge part of it is, according to them, is diners spending less money for a whole variety of reasons,
Well,
whether it's fear, anticipation.
It's been a little nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
You know, unless you're like a millionaire, somebody who's really loaded. I think you looked at this last week and had a nervous breakdown, didn't you? So one of the things you might not be doing is running out to any kind of restaurant. You'd be at home, as we discussed last week, making your mac and cheese and your rice and beans.
Well, you know, and another example, just personal, and it's anecdotal, I admit. I was trying to make a reservation at a particular hotel for a weekend down the line here. I couldn't get it, and I always check back because you never know what's going to happen. And all of a sudden, on the same weekend I was trying for, there are a ton of openings. Now, I have no idea.
In the United States?
In the United States, by the way. I have no idea.
Where was it?
I'm not telling you. I have no idea if that's a function of any of these
Cape
things.
Cod?
Canadians, did I say I'm not telling you?
New York City?
I'm not telling you.
New York City. Okay, it's New York City.
301-8970. So we're exclusively interested in your leisure budget, such as this. I don't mean you lay money aside and have an actual budget, but are you spending less going out to eat? Are you spending less on travel? As I said a minute ago, are your travel plans, if they exist, closer to home because it's cheaper, safer, whatever the deal is? 877-301-8970.
You know, when I was walking down to the bathroom, they had one of those advertisements for Viking cruises, and they were going to go to St. Lucia or all these wonderful places. I don't think, even if I weren't worried about money, that I'd want to go someplace like now.
Are they tariffing?
I have to keep explaining myself.
Are we tarifying St. Lucia? Are we?
No, it's just the idea of going. It's just the idea of America not being disliked.
Oh.
Yeah, and going in a place where you feel as though people are looking at you and thinking, is that a horrible American or is that a nice American? We're going to talk with Christopher Muther about this later. You know, Canadians feeling rather hostile toward
Wouldn't you?
a lot of America. Yeah, I kind of would, and I think you do feel.
Not only are we screwing
people
with
are
our
weighing in on the music.
What's
limb.
that?
They said it's ghastly. Do you think it's ghastly?
I don't think it's ghastly. And I don't. It's not. It's sub-gas. It's better than ghastly.
It's sub-ghastly.
No, it's better. I meant better than ghastly. It's like it's better than
Yeah,
ghastly.
it was a shock. It ended
What
quickly.
do you think of the music? It is better than ghastly. If you want to email, thank you. Most of our listeners get sort of off track during our show. If you're dying to comment on the new music,
They're
there's more to
commenting.
come. By the way,
That's obnoxious.
feel free. Well,
Ghastly
thank you.
and obnoxious.
We don't like you either. So thank you very much. Oh, I think we're going to get sued for that one.
That's the old one.
It is. We're not allowed to do that
You're not
anymore.
allowed to do that anymore.
877-301-8970. Isn't it? You know what I also woke up with this morning that has nothing to do with this topic? And we are at part fault here. Do you see? This is not funny.
No, text was funny.
Okay, then I'll save it for a few minutes. 877-301-8970. Leisure budgets, do they exist anymore? Are you changing your eating out plans, your travel plans? Now that you're not laughing, I'm going to say what I said.
Okay.
We don't talk about what's going on in Gaza, which is an unmitigated horror show.
Well,
other cities bombed
Jim,
in Ukraine the other
it's
day.
getting so
many people
saying something about Gaza from a sympathetic perspective.
You get deported.
Might be deported. I mean, 60 Minutes had that physician, an American physician, a couple of weeks ago, talking about taking care of children there with
I know.
Amputated legs and having no anesthesia. But in the United States of America now, that's considered deportable offense. I mean,
wasn't Trump going to end the Ukrainian-Russia thing on day one? Am I right about that? I think he was.
Day one. Okay, so here's a person that's concerned about finances. I'm not doing much different than I was before. Just eating mac and cheese before for the past year, now having mac and cheese, considering eating the box as well.
You know, one of the things, before we get to your calls, one of the beauties about eating out and at affordable places and going on vacation is both are stress relieving kinds of things. And because of the stress, the economic stress, you can't do those things. It adds to your psychological stress. So it's like a twofer.
We have a little Airbnb in Vermont. Over the last 8 years, about 40% of our guests have come from Canada to mountain bike. Our bookings are way down this year as a result, says Chris in Bellrica. Okay.
In Billrica?
In Billrica.
Billrica. It's a new community.
I think that's right. Billrica.
Let's go to Sheila in a car.
Hi,
You're
Sheila.
first on Boston Public Radio. Welcome to the show, Sheila. Hi.
Hey there, how are you?
I think
good
we're
morning.
good. Thank you. You too.
You think you're good. Calling because we just went to Quebec City. We drove, and then we took my mother and sister-in-law. And I was getting a little concerned about how the Quebecians might take us Americans coming up there. And I got to tell you, super friendly. But one thing that was a smash hit was my sister-in-law went out and bought pins that said we didn't vote for him. So we wore them on our jackets. We wore them everywhere we went. And I got to tell you, people took pictures with us. They thought it was great. We had a great time. And despite everything, the Canadians are always super friendly.
You know, that's a great idea. Like we used to have those bumper stickers a million years ago, and everybody
Don't blame
in the country,
me, I'm from Massachusetts.
Yeah, on the Nixon McGovern presidential race. Sheila, that's a great idea. If you're going to Canada, have a big, maybe you should put it on your forehead. I did not vote for Donald Trump. Or a hat, maybe.
But Sheila, you said the Canadians were all nice to you?
They were. I have family in Toronto, and my husband had always wanted to see old Quebec City, so we stayed at an amazing
Quebec City is
hotel
great.
there, and they were so friendly. They'd see our pins. They would start laughing. One couple, they wanted to take pictures with us. It was fabulous.
Sheila, but I have to.
Enough.
I think that's great, and I love Canada a lot. However, if the tables were turned, I wouldn't be nice to Canadians who they came here because I said to a friend this weekend. We were talking about this very topic, and by the way, talking about it in the context of Canada, and I made a stupid comment. It's like it's Trump. It's not us. And my friend said, "It is us. He's president because we voted for him. The American people decided." And so if Canada had done what we did to them, attempt to destroy our economy, say we should become a province, and a Canadian, I'd probably treat them pretty poorly too. So
they're very polite.
You had a great experience,
Those
Sheila.
Canadians.
Thank you for the call.
Very clean bathrooms along the highways.
They are?
Yes.
No.
Yeah, unlike
Nothing
here.
to do with it.
A couple of people say our other music was horrible, like chalk and a blackboard, so they're
Really?
glad we have new music.
Monroe from JP says the new music gives him gas. So that I'm...
Okay, we don't give a crap about your opinion.
Well, actually, I do. I feel bad about that, so I'm sorry. I don't know what we can do about it.
Somebody said they went to Paris and reports back that as long as you're not a quote-unquote ugly American, the Parisians have been polite and friendly. You know, I probably told the story before, but why not tell it again, Margie, about going, one of my kids did was in Paris for the semester, and I went over to visit, and it was like 10 years ago. And we went to the movies, and I don't know how we ended up at American Sniper. That was the Bradley Cooper movie about the American sniper that was shooting all the people in Iraq. And, of course, we invaded the wrong country in Iraq. That was a big mistake, as we now know. I'll never forget getting to the theater, and we got there late, and the theater was packed. And we had to walk to the front row. And people can tell you're Americans. You know, you look different, you dress different. Yeah. We had to walk to the front row of that movie theater, and I could hear the people kind of saying, Americans, look at the Americans.
Wow.
Bradley Cooper was an American sniper, killing the people in the wrong country.
Amazing.
Yeah, well, it's pretty.
It's horrible.
Kind of terrible. It's like people going there in travel in general to Europe during the Iraq War.
You want another? We're talking about vacation. Let's talk restaurants too. Our favorite restaurants, I think I speak for you, are the small independent ones, places that own a couple of restaurants or maybe one restaurant or that sort of thing. I would really urge you, subject to what your finances allow. We did this during COVID too. Don't let them go out of business. These are like incredible neighbors.
We are one of the best patrons of restaurants anywhere.
But
of course, you're very into food, as we know.
But that's not really my point, actually, and nor is the sound really my point. But let's get back on track. Gary in North Carolina, we're talking about people's leisure budgets, restaurants, eating out, travel, that sort of thing. Welcome to the show. Hi.
Hi, how you doing?
Good.
Fine, thank you.
Yeah, I'm visiting from Wisconsin, where I live, and visiting my son and his family, and I really couldn't afford to go to a resort other than to visit family.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, to me, that's the best way to go if you have people you want to see my grandkids, etc. In August, I'm flying to visit my sister in Kingston. Hope to make it in to see you guys again at the library.
Great, we'd love you too.
Oh, thank you, Gary.
And, yeah. But to me, every day is a vacation since I've been retired. So,
but you're essentially,
you.
but you're planning your traveling in such a way that you minimize expenses, like staying with family or whatever it is, right? Yeah, I think
correct. That's correct. My ex-wife, when I was working in Florida, used to gripe because every year I'd go up to visit my mother in Randolph for a month. And she said, why do we always have to go there? I said, because it doesn't cost. Where can I go for a month?
You can't blame that one on Trump.
You know? God,
hey, Gary, it's good to speak to you
for
again.
a month.
Thanks for the call. Hope to see you soon.
This has nothing to do with Trump's tariffs. We want to point out, people are asking if this is right. We had to change the music. No, nothing to do with Trump. Linda from Warwick says she booked my trip to Europe a while back, but now she's scared she won't be able to get back into the country with immigration officials check all the anti-Trump posts on her phone.
Well, you know, for those who say that's ridiculous, because I assume that person is a citizen, wait till you hear Marjorie's discussion with Nancy Gertner in the noon hour. You raised a lot of wonderful points about what the Trump administration may do, even with people who were citizens here, should they be able to get away with what they're doing with undocumented people.
I think it's, the old thing. First they came for the people that were not citizens, and then they came for the citizens. I mean, I think a lot of people are very worried about it, including your buddy Larry Tribe over there, Professor Emeritus at Harvard Law School. He's very worried about it.
We rarely read positive text, but this is such a warm one. I wanted to read it. Anonymous text. Their first Marjorie was in black and white. That was last week. Now they have ghastly new music. Another pathetic day on Boston Public Radio. Thank you. We appreciate that.
I think I'm back in color today, aren't I?
You are.
I don't have my Zoom on. Thank you.
Penny in the car.
Hard.
Welcome to the show. Hi, Penny.
Hey.
Hi.
Hi. I'm from Cambridge, and I love to go out to eat with family and friends, medium, upper-priced restaurants, not Sky House. But I think the restaurants might...
Whoop. Say that again. We lost you. Hey, Penny, when you said the restaurants might, after the word might, we lost you. Keep going.
Oh, you know what? I'm in a tunnel here.
No, it's fine now. Keep doing it.
I'm going to be, okay. I think the restaurants might temper their prices a little bit. I mean, $15 for a glass of, quite frankly, ordinary wine is a little steep, you know.
Yeah, but can I tell you something? We have a lot of restaurateurs on the show who are almost without exception wonderful, community-oriented people. Their prices are going up for everything, from wine to produce to virtually everything. Yeah. They're having trouble getting workers because undocumented workers are scared to come to work, so they got to raise salaries. So I don't think they have that. It'd be great if they could, but I don't think they have that option. Everybody's getting squeezed, not just you. So are you cutting back, or you decided that's one luxury you're not going to cut back on?
Probably one luxury I'm not cutting back on. However, I do think, I could have a drink before I go, but of course I love to have a drink at the restaurant.
Penny, that's a great call. Thank you. By the way, that sounds like a really small thing. Don't you love having a drink at a restaurant over dinner?
Absolutely.
Would you hear what Penny said?
Yeah.
She'd consider having a drink at home before you went.
I think a lot of people do that. They'll have the designator driving, and everybody else will be having their traveler. They have their traveler drink in the car on the way to the place. They don't want to spend that much money. Yeah, I mean, if you have 2 cocktails, that's $30. That's a lot of money. People complain about the prices at McDonald's. The Happy Meals are through the roof. Okay, we haven't changed our leisure budget, but made the decision for the next 4 years to only travel and spend our money in the New England region. Donna A. says she just came back from Portugal. People were very kind. The few political conversations I had, people think Trump is an idiot.
Okay, good. That's good. We got to take a break, Marjorie.
Okay, we got to take a break. Ooh, we're going to hear the new music on the break.
We are.
Yeah, we are. Okay.
It's not ghastly. That's our motto. It is not ghastly.
There it is. What do you think?
It's ghastly. Okay. We didn't ask you, whoever that woman is.
Okay. We're going to keep talking about your travel and your dining out budget. For a few more minutes, you're listening to Boston Public Radio with our new snazzy music, 89.7 GBH, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
San Diego and Tijuana sit side by side on the West Coast, united by culture, economic ties, and great weather.
But the cities are also divided by a hardened international border. I'm Marco Werman.
And I'm Carolyn Beeler. We're broadcasting from San Diego with the day's top global news.
Next time on The World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And Compass on the Bay, an assisted living community in South Boston dedicated to those with Alzheimer's and related dementias, featuring research-based therapeutic programming. More at compassonthebay.com. And Mass General Brigham Health Plan, ranked #1 in member satisfaction among commercial health plans in Massachusetts by J.D. Power for the 2nd consecutive year. Details at mgbhp.org/everyday.
Well, let me just say that's the worst music I've ever heard in my whole life. That was really
okay. That was
brutal.
a technical error, John says.
Okay, welcome back.
Didn't we pick this out?
No, obviously not. Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marjorie and Jim Browder.
I think you picked it out.
YouTube.com/GBH News. We're at the library tomorrow, Wednesday, and Friday. Tomorrow we have a lot of great stuff, including Ken Burns and Sarah Botstein will be there live at 11:30. I wouldn't miss that. If you're just tuning in, we're doing another economic check-in. We've done groceries. Today, it's, I guess, recreation, going out to eat, taking family vacations, all getting more expensive. And obviously, there's a lot of uncertainty undermining everything. How are you handling it? At 877-301-8970. Nicole, who's answering the phone, said, a caller just hung up on us, probably because of the music.
Oh, that was that. Okay, John says it was a technical problem.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay, I'm going hiking in May in Portugal and Spain. I have patches on my day pack. One is the flag of Canada. The other is the flag of Ukraine. How about that?
Let's go to Jim in Maine. Welcome to the show. Hi.
Good morning.
Hi.
First things first. I like the old music better.
Well, it's too late. Thank you.
We had a copyright issue.
Yeah, whatever.
I know. Exactly. It's terrible.
So, I'm sure both of you and your audience have heard of the 3 stages of retirement.
What are they?
My wife and I are fortunately currently in the go-go stage. We have no idea how long it's going to take us to get to the slow-go or no-go stage. But if we were to capitulate to this situation and stop traveling and stop living our lifestyle, I would feel like Columbia or certain law firms that we gave up. And I'm not about to do that. So we're going full speed ahead, and who knows what the future is going to bring.
Well, yeah, but Jim, I respect that, and I totally get it. What if you're 40 years old and have 2 young kids? Do you have the same luxury to do go-go? I don't think so for the average moderate to middle income person.
You're not in your retirement at that stage.
Well, I understand.
Yeah, I mean, you do what all of us did at that stage of our lives. You live responsibly. You spend what you have. You put away what you think you need to put away for your kids' education.
But there's a difference. There's a difference, Jim, I guess is what I'm saying. As I understand, in normal times, that's the way one operates. There's additional fear and anxiety about the cost of things. Inflation likely to go up. Obviously, the costs of a lot of goods coming to this country going up. Are there going to be tariffs? Are there not going to be tariffs? So I would say that the pressure on that typical 40-year-old, 35-year-old couple is very different. But, Jim, thanks for the call. 877-301-8970. I want to repeat what I said a minute ago because you didn't react at all, but I think it was a very good point, even though it's obvious.
Okay.
Going out to eat, even if it's a very moderate income place or going on even a close-by vacation, helps relieve the stress of all the other crap you're dealing with in your life. But because of all the other crap you're dealing with in your life, you can't do the stress-relieving things that ordinarily, you know what I mean, you would do. Well, so it's like a twofer kind of thing.
If you're worried about your bills every month, you're just not going to go out to eat, and you're not going to go to a place to go on vacation. But somebody just texted, they say that somebody they know runs a campground, and they're packed, booking up, because tenting is much cheaper than staying in hotels.
I've actually, I meant to say this to you, I was going to tell you off. I've decided to do some camping Can you see me camping? No. Can you see what happens when you go out and if anybody can tell us, well, this is not the topic, but if you're going to camp rather than stay in a
it's a great way to save money.
What do you do when it's pouring?
I don't know what you're doing.
Well, how about answering the question?
I've not been in a situation
When was the last time you went camping?
Oh, my God, when I was in college.
Really?
I hated it then.
Do you have a sleeping bag?
I went to camping once, and there was a bear that attacked the car.
Is that true?
Yes, I told you that.
Do you know I heard
Yosemite.
On BZ Radio last night, there are 4,500 brown bears or black bears that are coming east.
Yeah.
I don't know why are they coming east?
They're ticked off.
What?
They're ticked off.
They are too, by the way.
Lisa in Pembroke, thank you for calling.
Hello, Lisa.
Hello there. Nice to chat with you guys.
You too.
So my husband and I started this during COVID. We would basically take a back road, say 106, from Pembroke, and just follow it all the way to the end. And we ended up in Central Falls, Rhode Island.
Oh.
So we basically pick these places and then explore. And then we kind of go, oh, my God, there's this Peruvian restaurant. It's on the river. Let's eat there. Or we'll take a pilgrimage, for example, and we'll buy our coffee in Tiverton, Rhode Island at Coastal Roasters. We'll go to Portugalia in Fall River. And then we'll go to Westport Vineyards for wine. So basically we took that opportunity to explore our own neighborhoods. So instead of flying to Europe, which we can't now anyway because of my mom, we basically said, okay, let's explore Massachusetts, let's explore Rhode Island, let's explore these different towns and different cultures and different local restaurants.
I've been to all those places, Lisa. I love that. I've been to Portugalia, I've been to Coastal Roasters, what was the third place you mentioned? Oh, the Westport Vineyards.
Westport.
Yeah, those are all, and there's a great, isn't Little Compton have a vineyard too, I think?
I don't know, but you're also helping local businesses.
Those are great places, all of them.
That is great.
Yeah.
Cheap wine in Portugalia.
The Shark restaurant. The Shark Peruvian restaurant in Central Falls is absolutely phenomenal. And, I mean, you go there, you feel like you are in the foreign country. I mean, it's just the culture, the different varieties of Spanish. I mean, I was just sort of like, wow, this is incredible.
Lisa, that was a spectacular
that was a great call.
Very helpful phone
one time
call.
I accidentally set, I was driving to the Cape and I accidentally set avoid highways on my Waze thing, and I thought it was because there was terrible traffic. It took me like 3.5 hours to get there. Yeah. But the fun thing is you were driving on all these back roads. It was really cool. You can do that. Avoid.
Well, not only is that fun, by the way, but this is not like a vacation. Do you ever decide if you're early for a meeting or a getting together with somebody to just drive down streets in Boston that you've never been down before? You ever do that?
I've not done that, Jim.
Well, I would if I were you. So in any case, Jonathan watching on YouTube says, I think this captures it. The new music is the soundtrack to a mugging. That's the nicest thing we've heard from
John says it's not that bad, he says.
Can I tell you what the problem is? When you get used to something, even if it's subliminal, because I wasn't even sure what music we were playing, when you get used to something, it's changed. You're not, you're discomforted. You know what I mean?
Yeah, Dave and Amherst wants us to pay the royalty and bring back the old tunes.
We just got sued for that. As soon as John hit the button, 2 seconds later, the lawsuit was filed. Let's go to Ann.
Anonymous texter says, Marjorie, couldn't you just play the test of the emergency broadcast system? That would sound better than the new music. Boy, we're not doing very well so far, are we?
Ann in the South End.
Hi, Ann.
Welcome to the show. Hi.
Hi. I also think it has to do with what age you are, because I'm 58, so my kids are 24 and 26, so I do want to do vacations now. I'm planning on going out to Seattle and doing national parks and some golf with them in May.
Oh.
Because this is before they have significant others, and just the timing of having one hotel room and economizing on that before they get into serious relationships.
Yeah, it's a good time to do it. Then before they have grandkids, that really cuts into your travel budget.
And thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate the call.
Did you hear this?
Yeah.
Neil Young is concerned he won't be allowed back into the country after his tour, which includes going to Ukraine.
Well, this gets back to your thing. Even if is he a Canadian or is he?
I don't know.
United
a lot
States
of people
citizen?
are doing the Canadian.
He's born
maple
in
leaf.
Canada. That's an interesting question.
Canadian flags, maple leaf, moose. Ben and Peabody says he's doing that to pretend he's a Canadian. You heard that a lot during the Iraq War, pretending you're Canadian when you're an American traveling overseas, especially if you were in student groups.
Yeah.
Pretend you're Canadian.
In any case, we spoke to Ann. Ann, thanks for the call. Appreciate it. 877-301-8097. I want to encourage, again, small businesses, whether it's little hotels that are owned by families or little resorts or small independent restaurants in your neighborhood. If you're going to spend any money on eating out or going on vacation, spend it on small businesses that are owned by people who are just like you. It's just that's what they do for a living.
Here's an idea. If you have lots of anti-Trump stuff on your phone when traveling outside the United States, leave your real phone at home, get a burner phone, put your essential numbers on your phone, and then they won't find out.
I'd like to see you switch to a burner phone, by the way. That'd be really successful.
I'm not going anywhere.
You're not going anywhere?
I'm going nowhere. Well, I never go anywhere anyway. Let's talk to Randolph. Hi, Randolph.
No, Randolph is where they're from.
Oh, D in Randolph. Hi, D.
Hi.
He's incognito.
Incognito, apparently.
Hey.
Hi, D. How are you?
It's D.
We know. That's why we said hello, D. Hi, D. Okay,
Go ahead.
No, I think there's a bad connection.
A bad connection.
Randolph,
okay.
Bad connection.
All right. Anonymous texter says Marjorie can explore bus lanes in Boston she hasn't been on before as a leisure activity. Ha!
No, I'm serious. So are you intentional about spending money in places where you like the people, like what they do, they're important to your community? Do you do that?
I think I'm like a lot of people that are older that are worried now about losing all my savings for retirement. And then you hear about the bond markets were supposed to be safe, and now maybe they're not so safe. So these things are very nerve-wracking. I mean, if you're loaded...
Let me ask you this.
Yes.
You've mentioned the bond market 5 shows in a row. I'm keeping it. Do you know, we worked together 26 years now. You had not mentioned the bond market in 25
I did not
years,
know it existed.
11 months, and 3 weeks.
That's right.
And now you've mentioned the bond market
That's right.
every day. Do you want to talk about the bond market for a second?
I'm not qualified to talk about the bond market. All I know is that
you
the
should
bond
worry
market
about them.
has been judged to be the safest place to put your money, and now that other countries do not view the American economic system as safe as they used to, that has made the bond market less reliable. I do know that much.
Stephanie, we're going to end this segment with Stephanie and then one caller.
Okay.
Stephanie has a really interesting idea, which I'm embarrassed that Marjorie did not think of. Why not play the Eton crank radio sound instead of the new music?
That's brilliant.
And thank you for that, and thank you for the drum, whatever that thing is called. And here is Nick, who also has a music recommendation. He's from Roslindale. Nick, what's your deal? Go ahead.
Look, that's nice and simple. The new music is horrible.
Thank you.
Like what you need to do is you need to do live music Fridays, and you need to have a contest and have listeners, all compose originals and come and perform them and get some people to judge it or make a whole thing out.
That's really a
great
fabulous idea.
I proposed that,
Nick,
and Jim
thank
said
you.
no.
No, actually, I was the one who proposed it, and you were not paying attention, is what it was. By the way, a friend of ours who shall remain unnamed says Neil Young is a U.S. citizen now, maybe also Canadian, meaning one of those joint deals, but he canceled his Ukraine concert. That is incredible.
Why?
I assume for the reasons you mentioned. Concerned about Listen to this. John Parker just told us this, that Neil Young, who was, I would argue, not only one of the greatest performers who ever lived, but also one of the most principled performers who ever lived, said he was afraid if he went to Ukraine and criticized Trump that he might not be allowed back in the country. I mean, this is the stuff you want to bring up with Nancy Gertner.
Yeah, that
if they get away with what they're getting away with Abrego Garcia.
That's right. They could get away with people who are
even citizens
and are critics of Donald Trump. That is what I'm afraid of, and I think there's reason to be afraid of it. But we'll ask her because she's an attorney and she's
here
a judge.
noon. And by the way, if you want to keep texting us throughout the whole show about the music, we'd love that.
We're not doing well.
Keep doing that
so far.
No, it's not us. We didn't compose
Jim
the
Lancaster
music.
says it's at least better than Little Drummer Boy.
We were going to do that in the next hour. Actually, we have Little Drummer Boy in the next hour.
All right, coming up after a quick break, we're going to talk with our food policy man, Corby Kummer. We're going to talk to him as well about restaurant struggles because he knows all about that, grocery prices, and the education secretary's apparent confusion.
Don't give this away.
Okay.
Don't give this away. She's confused. Let's put it this way.
Artificial intelligence.
Yes.
She's extremely confused. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. And here it is, Jim, our new music.
I like it. Not Gaslight.
I'm Jared Bowen. Today on The Culture Show, David Grann, the New York Times bestselling author of Killers of the Flower Moon and The Wager, on his writing and reporting process and adapting his work for the screen. Plus a wonderful and strange tribute to David Lynch at the Somerville Theater. That and more on The Culture Show today at 2 on 89.7 GBH.
Support for GBH comes from you.
And Newbury Court, serving Concord, Massachusetts for 30 years as a not-for-profit continuing care retirement community dedicated to older adults. More at newburycourt.org. And Porter Square Books, hosting poet Martin Espada with his new collection of poems, Jailbreak of Sparrows, April 23rd at 7. Registration information at portersquarebooks.com.
Okay, keep it to yourself. Whatever you think.
That wasn't bad.
That was just great.
Corby, what do you think of the new music?
Well, no, not yet. Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marjorie Egan and Jim Browder. We're streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We're at the library tomorrow. Filmmakers Ken Burns and Sarah Botstein will be there live at 11:30. CNN's John King, etc. We're joined now on Zoom by food policy analyst, multiple James Beard winner, Corby Kummer. Corby's the executive director of the Food and Society Policy Program at the Aspen Institute, senior editor at The Atlantic, and a senior lecturer at the Tufts Friedman School of Nutrition, Science, and Policy. Now you can ask him, Marjorie.
What do you think, Corby? Did you hear the tune?
Oh, I thought the music was great, and especially your talk about locally owned businesses.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
We learned that from you, by the way, and we've tried to live it.
You're such a nice guy, Corby. So we were just talking with listeners about concerns, money concerns about going away on vacation or going out to restaurants. There's a great piece in the New York Times talking about how basically income inequality has gotten so severe and the middle class has shrunk so much that the places, pizza joints that people used to go to, even those places have become unaffordable for lots of Americans.
I love they quoted a guy named Daniel Cox, who's a pollster by profession. He does surveys about income, and he's got a family of 4, and he can't get out of like Pizza Hut for under $100. Yeah. So he doesn't go sit down with his family, and he thought, I want to see, are people sitting down with their families at these so-called fast casual restaurants anymore? And the answer is no. Pandemic hit restaurants hard. It raised prices, and families just don't go out to eat very much. It's a very long piece of the New York Times about sort of the rise and fall of chain restaurants, which were kind of terrible that they were appearing on highways and driving out family-owned smaller businesses in towns, in small towns that had been independently owned for generations. They quote James Stern, who wrote the Road Food series for decades, saying, they were death, they were the enemy, they were the worst things ever. But what they did was allow families to go out and sit down together. And now they're dying because they can't afford the service charges, they can't afford the rent, and people aren't willing to spend money going out anymore, which is a real shame because they're not talking to each other and they're not meeting people from other classes in their own communities.
By the way, that part about, I wish we had said this earlier, the things you said at the end about the pluses of going, I'm not the most social person ever, but it is true when you go out, not only do you socialize with the people you went with, but it's unavoidable that you'll have connections with other people there that you wouldn't have otherwise, which is really a pretty important part of living, which disappears.
I'm not an academic specialist in class mixing, but I'm always very alive to the idea that public transport is one of the few places that mixes all classes anymore, and that there was a whole, it's class neutral ground. One of the study authors said about Chili's, that a Chili's near a highway, more than anything else, civic institutions. I think this was an MIT Sloan School of Management data analyst who said Chili's was the place where the most zip codes with the most income variation mixed. And I thought, wow, I want to know more about what it was about Chili's. But now these places are dying and going out of business.
So, they sort of have you coming and going. So that moderate to middle income family can't afford to go out to a restaurant with their families. And so obviously what you're doing is you're eating at home, but groceries are becoming more expensive. We can talk about that in a second, but I have to say, Donald Trump really deserves it. We rarely give him credit here. This intellectual curiosity that he exhibits when talking about groceries was actually really moving. He spent a couple of moments earlier this month musing about a term that most Americans, Marjorie and me included, barely understand the meaning of. Here he is. Here he is.
He's coming.
Or maybe he's not.
That there is a school system that's going to start making sure that...
No, that's not. Okay, in any case.
Groceries.
It's only my
favorite
talking about soundbite in the whole show.
Oh,
here it is.
Now.
Okay, let's try again.
It's an old-fashioned term that we use, groceries. I used it in the campaign. It's such an old-fashioned term, but a beautiful term, groceries. It sort of says a bag with different things in it.
Now you're somebody who's in the food world. Did you know that it sort of says a bag with different things in it? Be honest here. You never thought of that, did you? Honestly? Yes or no?
Groceries? No, it never occurred to me.
Well, when you think about it, it's like George H.W. Bush having no idea how much milk cost, even though I don't have any idea what milk costs either, and I buy it all the time. But he's probably never been to a grocery store, right?
That's a good point.
He eats in the restaurants, at his hotels, gets room service.
Do you know he used the term on the campaign? Did you know that?
I did not know
term
he used
groceries?
But all I remember him talking about is clean coal.
Clean coal.
Clean coal.
Sort of
Which
says
is
a bag
impossible.
with different things in it.
A bag with different things on it.
Thank you very much.
That's
It was George H.W. Bush who didn't know that you could scan a product and self-check out.
That's what it was.
He said, what do they think of next?
Okay, so back to
Yeah.
groceries. I assume it's obvious, but why are grocery prices going up too, Corby Kummer?
Tariffs, and it's going to be terrible for restaurants, and it's going to be terrible for, there's a piece by Pete Wells in today's New York Times about restaurant owners panic buying like everybody is with cars and everything else, and figuring out, okay, what are the imported ingredients that I can't do without? So I've got to start stocking up. And then 3 days later, Trump postpones the tariffs for 90 days and they put the panic ordering on hold. But that's what it is for grocery stores. They don't know how long their current stocks and current prices are going to last and when it's going to go up. But there's also a piece in today's, in the Weekend Globe about Chinatown and Latino restaurants in the North End driving up prices. And the owners there are really confused, but there was a very good quotation from a woman named Stefano at Cafe Paradiso, a great place on Hanover Street, who said, though she doesn't import directly, she said this about future tariffs: whatever I pay, it's going to go to the consumer.
Yeah, she was very...
Okay. That's what's happening at every supermarket.
Yeah, she was very frank about the whole thing. So, Corby Kummer, this is a really appetizing story about how we ended up with a government agency to check what was in our foods because of milk being thinned with dirty water, coffee containing bones, ground pepper full of dirt, cocoa packed
This is the early
with
1900s
sand.
we're talking about.
Yeah. So that's when the United States decided that they better have a agency to regulate and inspect the food system. But apparently that's Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the guy who's going to make America healthy again. He doesn't think we need that?
He doesn't know what's being cut. It's clear from everything he says when he's asked about, well, you said you care about chronic disease. Are you aware that you just completely fired everybody at CDC who's been working on a chronic disease for decades? Same thing with tobacco control. But now the administration is allowing meat processors to speed up production lines. So it sounds like, okay, that'll be more efficient. Maybe meat prices will come down. What it does is allow huge cattle to be hoisted up on chains while they're alive.
Oh God,
and
this is so upsetting. This story was so upsetting about how they torture these animals.
And we've talked about this under Trump 1, and they were trying to speed up lines on pork and chicken production lines, and they were kind of headed off. But now there's no checks on it, and the inspection is much less underfunded, terminating 3,500 employees of the Food and Drug Administration, which he's saying is a revolution. And consumer watchdogs are saying it's a safety bloodbath. What's especially galling about the FDA cuts is they're mostly industry-funded positions. It's not even saving the government money. It's just making the public unsafe because there will be so many fewer inspections. Rubio, under enormous pressure, reinstated government credit cards. Who cares about government credit cards? Well, it's what the food inspectors used to buy the samples of food that they were inspecting. And so under pressure, he restored hundreds of credit cards, but the workers apparently still can't use them. They still don't work. And so this system is being eroded. And there's much more of a likelihood that the poisons from the beginning of the 1900s, there's a great book by Deborah Bloom, who wrote a strong op-ed in the New York Times over the weekend saying the poison squad days. The poison squad were these strapping young men that the government hired and fed knowingly contaminated food to. They documented what happened to them, the illnesses of them. Aroused public outrage, and in 1906 there was a Safe Food Act that was greatly strengthened in 1938, and I got to be on an American Masters episode about this whole poison squad as a talking head. So I was a famous food inspection authority, which I wasn't, but they were very, very kind to feature me, and Deborah Bloom's book is terrific. But she's saying these bad old days of the great American stomachache, which is what a commentator called the whole 1890s in the U.S. because of adulterated food, we could be right on the track back to the great American stomachache.
You know, realistically speaking, I know it's very hard to predict, but I read the story and I was terrified. I don't have any idea what the food manufacturers are willing to try to get away with that they maybe wouldn't have been willing to try to get away with in normal times as compared to now. How much at risk do you think we are, realistically?
Harry, remember the Peanut Corporation of America, like RCA, except it was PCA? And it was a CEO was sent to jail because he was knowingly allowing contaminated peanut products to go out to save money, and I think 11 people died. And there's going to be much more of that. We sort of, for comic effect, talk a lot about nuts and bolts and nails being found, metal shards for manufacturing processes in a lot of products. And, you know, mostly it's found, it's reported, it's recalled, but they're not going to be found. These checks and balances are not going to be there. So it's less the idea of an evil CEO like the peanut guy saying, send them out. We'll just, wait for people to die, but we'll make a lot of money in the meantime. It's not so much that kind of cynicism as just inattention and sloppiness not being caught because there are fewer inspectors making random inspections. And, it's been going on for decades, the idea of industry voluntary regulation. Republican administrations for decades have been saying, let's just leave it in the hands of industry. They know what they're doing. They'll fill out the paperwork, and we don't have to send pesky inspectors, or we'll announce well in advance our inspections and not randomly surprise them to see what's really happening on the meat slaughtering line. But now there's going to be fewer of them for even so-called random inspections.
What are other Western nations? What kind of food inspection systems do they employ, Corby Kummer?
They're much higher, but it also begins with regulation of what goes into their products is so much stricter. And that's one thing that RFK Jr. has been saying. Why has the United States been allowing in these adulterants and food colorings into ingredient lists that Europe has been banning for decades? Again, voluntary compliance. So industry has been allowed to say what's grass, generally recognized as safe, since the late 1950s, early 1960s, and they've been, just putting whatever they want into food and waiting to be caught. Again, it's relying on industry to keep us safe. Europe doesn't do that. So one of the things that RFK used on the campaign trail was, we're going to be just as strict as Europe. They're also much stricter for inspection.
Higher in Europe. I was just going to say, sorry to interrupt you, but I heard Trump complaining about how some European countries won't take our meat. Well, they won't take it because they don't like all the hormones that are in it, and in some cases antibiotics in it. And that's the reason a lot of people don't want it. That's how a lot of people got started shopping at Whole Foods when their kids were little, because they didn't want their kids to eat meat that was full of hormones and antibiotics, and they'd be going into puberty at age like 8. What?
Chlorine washed
chicken. Right now it's chlorine washed chicken that was the Europe and England wouldn't allow it.
Yeah, well, I don't want to eat chlorine washed chicken either.
Oh, well, then neither do I, Marjorie. Yeah. Corby, we should have brought this up earlier because it obviously relates to grocery prices.
I tell you, what do I put up with, Corby?
But farmers are also getting hit coming and going. I mean, there were great stories, horrible stories late last week about soybean farmers in red states which overwhelmingly voted for Trump, not being able to access their principal market, which was China. And the story we read over the weekend was about workers, and we all know what huge percentage undocumented workers are to bringing, working the fields and livestock and whatever they do in farms. And a lot of undocumented people don't want to go to work because they're afraid of getting snatched right now. So what I read in this piece which I was unaware of, speaking of other countries, a lot of other countries have special immigration laws that allow farm workers to become citizens much more expeditiously. I don't know if it's out of kindness to the worker or if it's out of kindness to the employer, the owner of the farm. But is that an accurate picture of what's happening elsewhere, and how bad is the picture here?
Yeah, and of course, it's kindness to the employer. The visas in the U.S. have apparently been for, I think, 3 weeks, ridiculously short periods, whereas in Europe, it's seasonal. You can come in for 6 months. That's the time when the farmer needs you for the harvest, and then you leave. That's going to be your visa permit. And, it's enormously efficient. And countries all over the world rely on guest workers to pick their crops. Yeah, in the U.S., it's 3 weeks at a time. It's just crazy, whereas in New Zealand and Australia, it's 6 months. Even in Mexican and India, they also allow a pathway to citizenship for these guest workers, which the U.S., for years, it's been very controversial. Some Republicans even wanted a pathway to citizenship, but now that's on the way out. But apparently Trump's getting the message that farmers need these people and is thinking of making some kind of carve-out to allow some of these guest workers in, because otherwise, especially the citrus crop, they're just going to go unpicked.
So, Corby, we figured we were in a real dilemma this morning about something one of the cabinet secretaries said.
Yes.
And we figured you were the person to clarify. It was specifically the education secretary, Linda McMahon. And the good news is she was speaking about K through 12, or maybe pre-K, I don't know, speaking about schools. And what we were unclear about is whether or not she meant to be talking about artificial intelligence or steak sauce. And so here is Linda McMahon, McMahon, talking about one of those things. Here she is.
That there is a school system that's going to start making sure that first graders or even pre-Ks have A1 teaching, every year starting, that far down in the grades. And that's a wonderful thing. Kids are sponges. They just absorb everything. And so it wasn't all that long ago that we're going to have internet in our schools. Whoop. Now, okay, let's see A1 and how can that be helpful?
By the way, I want to be as nice as I can be.
And repeats it.
Can she be this stupid? Obviously, what's happening is she's reading a speech that says AI on it, and the I looks like a number 1, or maybe it is. So she starts talking about steak sauce rather than artificial intelligence. Do you have any observations about that, Corby Kummer?
It was certainly good for Heinz. Kraft Heinz owns A1.
Oh, they do? That's great.
We certainly agree. Best to start them early. Let's have A1 on every cafeteria table.
That's right. Yeah, and they were saying in one of these stories, the people online were saying, well, maybe what they need to do is teach the kids how to be drinking the A1 steak sauce, and how can they get to drink it? And the smarter kids, maybe after they learn to drink that, can move up to Thousand Island dressing at their kindergartens. So,
I mean,
I don't know.
But
oh my God!
When we think about book bans and history bans, and they'll ban everything to do with LGBTQ, but they'll allow in Mein Kampf by Hitler.
I know. It's sad. It's very sad.
Maybe some steak sauce over Mein Kampf.
We're going to talk about, before you go, and it's 30 seconds, is the agriculture secretary out of it as the education secretary is?
No, apparently not. She knows more about agriculture. She's more of a business person. She's saying, I'm going to go along with RFK Jr., who's saying he has the authority to ban ultra-processed food from school lunches. He has no such authority, but I'll go along with him. Right. So no, and she's not as much an ideologue or a kind of dope as the A1 sauce person, but we have to see. There's lots of cautious hope in the food world about both RFK Jr. and Brooke Rollins.
Very cautious.
We just have to wait to see what they do.
Corby, thank you. Before we thank Corby. Then I have a correction to make about something we said in the last hour.
Oh, what did we say?
A person who works with Neil Young, who we both know, texted us. His cancellation in Ukraine had nothing to do with worry about getting back in the country. He was concerned about bringing his crew into a conflict zone.
War-torn area.
So he was worried about their safety there, not about getting back into the country. So our apologies.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that correction.
Corby, it's great to see you. Thanks so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, they had another terrible bombing over the weekend.
I know, it's just incredible.
And many children.
I know.
Anyway, we've been speaking with food policy analyst, multiple James Beard winner Corby Kummer, executive director of the Food and Society Policy Program at the Aspen Institute, a senior editor at The Atlantic, and a senior lecturer at the Tufts Friedman School of Nutrition, Science, and Policy. Coming up after the new news, we're going to talk to Nancy Gertner, a retired federal judge. on the fate of the wrongly deported man sent to an El Salvador prison, even though he shouldn't have been, and the Trump administration's apparent reluctance to do anything about that. And we're also going to talk about what that means if you can be deported wrongly. If you're not a citizen, can you be deported wrongly if you are a citizen? It's sounding to me like you can be. We're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
It's not over yet. More smart conversation about community issues is up ahead with Jim Braude and Marjorie Egan on Boston Public Radio. Right after a news update from NPR. Stay with us here on GBH 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you
and the University of Massachusetts Amherst, ranked the #1 public university in New England by U.S. News & World Report. You can learn more about research, innovation, and economic impact for the Commonwealth at umass.edu. Roadshow heads to the Maryland Zoo to see a menagerie of dazzling treasures in Baltimore. Guess the top find on a new episode of Antiques Roadshow, tonight at 8 on GBH2.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News. What matters to you?
I'm Jim Braude, head on Hour 2 of Boston Public Radio. The Supreme Court has sided with the wrongfully deported Abrego Garcia, still locked up in a gulag in El Salvador. What isn't clear is whether U.S. officials are going to try to get him back, with the administration dragging its heels. We'll talk about that, law firm capitulation at breakneck speed, and more with retired federal judge Nancy Gertner.
I'm Marjorie Egan. Then it's Travel Talk with Boston Globe travel writer Christopher Muther. Across the border to the north, how are our neighbors in Canada reacting to Trump's talk about turning their country into the 51st state? Not one to turn down a free trip, Christopher went north to talk with Ottawans about whether this political climate might make for an awkward traveling experience. All that and two more things next on the second hour of Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Windsor Johnston. President Trump is hosting the president of El Salvador at this hour at the White House. The meeting comes amid growing scrutiny over the administration's expanded deportation policies and El Salvador's handling of detainees. Freelance reporter Manuel Rueda says the two leaders are expected to address a number of issues, including the case of a Maryland man who was wrongly deported to El Salvador.
Last month, a Maryland resident, Kilmar Abrego Garcia, was sent by mistake to El Salvador. The Trump administration recognized he was sent there by mistake. His family hasn't even been able to get in touch with him, despite the Supreme Court's insistence that he should be repatriated. So the question is if this will be brought up during the meeting between both presidents.
In recent weeks, the Trump administration has deported more than 200 people, many of them Venezuelan nationals accused of gang affiliations. The man who oversaw the dismantlement of the U.S. Agency for International Development has left the State Department. NPR's Michelle Kellerman reports his departure comes just months into the Trump administration.
The State Department says that Pete Marocco was brought to the department to conduct an exhaustive review of every dollar spent on foreign assistance. The statement says Marocco, quote, exposed egregious abuses, adding, quote, we all expect big things are in store for Pete on his next mission. The department did not say what that might be. A Democrat on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, Brian Schatz, says Marocco's tenure brought what he called reckless and unlawful policy to the State Department. He says he wants to hear directly from Secretary of State Marco Rubio about the future of U.S. foreign assistance. Michelle Kellerman, NPR News, the State Department.
The Federal Trade Commission's antitrust trial against social media company Meta is underway. NPR's Bobby Allen reports Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg and former Chief Operating Officer Sheryl Sandberg are set to take the witness stand during the trial, which is expected to last 2 months.
The case is centered on whether Meta's acquisition of Instagram and WhatsApp violated competition laws.
Years before the purchases, Zuckerberg wrote in an internal email, quote, "It is better to buy than compete." The FTC says Meta became dominant only after competing unfairly to box out rivals and should be forced to break up Instagram and WhatsApp into separate companies. Meta says regulators approved the takeover of Instagram and WhatsApp more than a decade ago and that the FTC is punishing Meta for its success. Dozens of witnesses will testify under oath, including Zuckerberg, who is expected to take the stand for 7 hours. Zuckerberg has lobbied the Trump administration for the case to be dropped. It was originally filed during Trump's first term. Bobby Allen, NPR News.
Stocks are trading higher on Wall Street at this hour. The Dow is up 140 points, the Nasdaq up 48. This is NPR News in Washington.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. Massachusetts Representative Jim McGovern has sent a letter to officials at the Trump administration demanding answers as to why the visas of international students attending schools in his district were revoked. Mass Live reports that McGovern sent a letter to Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem on Friday, asking them to provide a reason as to why the visas of international students at Clark University, Worcester Polytechnic Institute, and UMass Amherst were revoked. All three colleges are located in McGovern's district, and all three announced last week that international students' visas were revoked. In his letter, McGovern called the actions of the administration disorienting, dangerous, and a disruption to the education of students he represents. He requested a response from both Rubio and Noem by this Friday, April 18. Jury selection underway in Boston today in federal court for two former state troopers and a driving school employee accused of fixing commercial driver's license tests. Prosecutors allege that the two retired troopers, Gary Cedarquist and Joel Rogers, issued driver's licenses to people who either failed the test or didn't take the test at all in exchange for gifts. The third defendant, Scott Kammer, worked at a driving school in Brockton. Prosecutors allege the trio's actions resulted in more than 24 people getting commercial driver's licenses without passing the test that measures if they can operate trucks and buses safely. We're at 58 degrees in Brighton right now. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Fisher Investments. Fisher's dedicated team of specialists provide resources on investing, retirement income, estate planning, and more. Learn more at FisherInvestments.com. Investing in securities involves the risk of loss.
He's Jim Browdy. I am Marjorie Egan. Welcome to hour number 2 of Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. That's our new music. We had copyright issues, so we had to change it. We're taking some flack, but we're doing the best we can here.
I love it, actually.
We're going to be back at the Boston Public Library tomorrow. We're going to be joined at the library by the legendary filmmaker Ken Burns and Sarah Botstein. We're going to talk about his new film work. And I said that they're going to come to the library.
No, I mean, it's their, meaning their new film work.
That's right, their new film work.
Yeah.
CNN's John King and more. Hello again, Jim.
On the American Revolution. By the way, we're going to play some sound before I introduce Judge Gertner, because one of the things we wanted to talk to her about right away was the fate of that man from Maryland, Abrego Garcia, who even the Justice Department lawyer admitted was wrongly deported to El Salvador. Trump is currently, at this moment, sitting in the Oval Office with the president of El Salvador, who obviously would do anything Trump asked him to do, but that's not the way it's going. So first we're going to play a clip of President Bukele from El Salvador saying he can't return Abrego Garcia. Here that is.
How can I smuggle a terrorist into the United States? I don't have the power to return him to the United States.
So you can release him inside El Salvador?
Yeah, but I'm not releasing, we're not very fond of releasing terrorists into our country. We just turned the murder capital.
Returning a terrorist to the United States, and he's, of course, not a terrorist. The second clip, when I was watching during the break, the person who was speaking was neither president. Steve Miller, who is behind most of the worst of the Trump administration, was, especially around immigration issues, was speaking nonstop. Here's a little bit of Donald Trump and Miller saying that the Supreme Court ruling on this was actually in their favor. Here they are.
What was the ruling in the Supreme Court, Steve? Was it 9-0?
Yes, it was a 9-0.
In our favor?
In our favor, against the district court ruling, saying that no district court has the power to compel the foreign policy function of the United States. As Pam said, the ruling solely stated that if this individual, at El Salvador's sole discretion, was sent back to our country, that we could deport him a second time. No version of this legally ends up with him ever living here because he is a citizen of El Salvador. That is the president of El Salvador. Your questions about it, per the court, can only be directed to him.
We're joined now on Zoom, talk about perfect timing, for another edition of On the Docket by retired federal judge Nancy Gertner. Judge Gertner is a senior lecturer at Harvard Law School and a BPR contributor. Judge Gertner, it's good to see you.
Good to be here again.
So, Judge Gertner, I don't understand. I know that this man who was wrongly deported to El Salvador came from El Salvador, as Steve Miller just said, and claimed that he would be in danger there. Conditions have changed in El Salvador, so maybe there'd be some question about that. But I don't understand how you can wrongly deport someone to another country and just leave him there. And I think the Supreme Court said the Trump administration had to give him due process and facilitate his coming back to the United States. So I don't understand this.
Well, let me sort of break it. Start with sort of the real situation as we understand it, and then the legal spin. So Bukele sucked up to Trump in February 2025, sends a tweet. Issues a tweet that says, send your prisoners here, convicted prisoners was what he said at that time, and give me $6 million. So the notion that this is foreign policy a la Brittany Griner is ridiculous. This isn't foreign policy. This was a contract between El Salvador and the United States to receive these prisoners. Brittany Griner with Russia, as you recall, the basketball star, that was foreign policy, that was delicate diplomacy. Here is a contract, a commercial enterprise, not foreign policy, a commercial enterprise. What the Supreme Court seemed to be saying in an effort to sort of cut the onion was you have to do essentially, Trump, have to do everything possible to get his return. That's what I understand facilitate. They can't direct El Salvador, but they could direct Trump. What that means today is that Donald Trump should say to Bukele, the head of El Salvador, bring this guy back. Bring this guy back. That's not a difficult thing at all. The Trump administration has interpreted, which is really sort of doublespeak, what the Supreme Court said as don't put any impediments on his return. In other words, allow him back in the country if El Salvador chooses to send him. That's not at all what the court said. The court said facilitate his return to the extent that your side of the equation can do that. And Trump clearly can. I mean, what? Just as a footnote, what we've seen in all of this from January 20th until now, all of the executive orders, there was always a lawful way to do all of this. And he has deliberately chosen the unlawful way, if only to prove his power, if only to show his power.
Unlawful way that he's chosen, and at least as of the moment, paid no price for it. Not only is he refusing to do anything to return, let's just take Abrego Garcia as one example, but his people are not even being held in contempt for refusal to take the court orders seriously. So it seems as of the moment, there's not a hell of a lot of incentive for them to worry about complying with the rule of law vis-a-vis these deportations.
Well, Abrego Garcia's lawyers are moving for contempt. And what contempt would look like in this situation would be that the officials that are defendants in that case could be held in contempt. There can be a fine imposed. They can be thrown in jail until they comply. But again, what compliance looks like in this case is clear. Trump turn to Bukele and say, we want this guy back. Period, full stop. This is not
or for Pam Bondi, who's sitting in that room, the Attorney General, when Bukele on the sound we just played said twice, we're not going to return a terrorist to the United States. She could have said, by the way, he's not a terrorist. We're asking you.
There was no indication.
None.
She's not going to say that.
No, I'm saying, but no. But Nancy Gertner is saying
she could.
Yeah, exactly.
But could she overrule the contempt order, the Attorney General?
No, she could not.
Could not. Okay.
The judge says, you officials that are in front of me, Bondi, whatever Homeland Security officials are in front of me, you have to say to Bukele, we request, it doesn't even have to be, we request, pursuant to this ridiculous agreement, we request that this guy come back. And is there any doubt in anyone's mind that Bukele would say, yes, sir?
Of course. But in a related note, and then I want to get to Marjorie's question, which I was dismissing early this morning. We got together, but I'm not anymore. There's also an exclusive piece in the Washington Post relating to Ozturk, who is the tough student who was kidnapped off the streets of Somerville. The headline is "No Evidence Linking Tough Student Anti-Semitism or Terrorism. State Department Office Found." This is not her lawyers. This is Marco Rubio's own State Department. So let's start with an easier one, I think. In this case, which Stephen Miller is also claiming, he said something like one of the greatest victories for a president in American history on the Alien Enemies Act, because they said he could use it, but of course he's ignoring, he Miller and he Trump, ignoring the fact they said there had to be notice and some level of due process for these people. Based on what's happened so far, let's start with an undocumented person who's done nothing wrong. Stephen Miller or one of them decides, or what's his face, Tom Homan says, I don't like the way they look. I'm going to deport them. We're not going to give them notice or due process. Put them on a plane, send them to El Salvador. The worst that's going to happen to them is someone will bring a contempt motion before the court, but that's the extent of it. And then Marjorie's next question, let me get this one out. Why would they stop with undocumented people if there's a citizen whose speech they don't like?
Your colleague, Larry Tribe, argues that with in a New York Times piece he co-wrote, saying that no one can stop the Trump administration from imprisoning any person it wants anywhere else in the world, jailing his critics, and then claiming, as it does now, that the courts have no jurisdiction.
Right.
So,
which question would you want me to answer?
All of them.
Yeah,
do them all.
Sorry.
Do them all.
I mean, not to panic people, but it sounds like what Tribe is saying, that an American citizen could face the same fate.
Right. I mean, think about this as a continuum, right? There are convicted criminals who are undocumented, who arguably, that's all that Bukele wanted. They are sent to that prison. Then there are people who violated, who are out of status, who are, people like the students whose status has been revoked, right? And they are usually simply deported. The legitimacy of the deportation is one thing. There should be due process, et cetera, but they're usually deported. If they are dumped in an El Salvador prison, that would be outrageous. By the way, particularly for those who are not from El Salvador. That's a whole other issue. And to your point, no, he is not allowed to deport any one of us for our speech. But just as in the Abrego Garcia case, if he did, there would be no recourse. That's the problem. No, he's not allowed. There's no question of, there would be no recourse. The judge's tools are only a fine or contempt. There's no question. That's the only one. You put Pam Bondi in jail and you say you do not get out until you make the request of Bukele to return this man. Contempt is, this is something that, was it Andrew Johnson reportedly said, the Supreme Court doesn't have an army. So right. It is just contempt. And the election.
So who's going to put them in contempt? The judge?
It would be the judge.
Of course.
Okay.
Yes,
and will they pay any attention to that judge's contempt order?
Well, they may. Here's the thing. Trump has said on the plane, yes, he will obey the Supreme Court, and presumably has said he will obey the courts. If Pam Bondi is in jail, maybe that would be enough. But the judge's tools are only financial tools, that is to say a fine, and jailing until the contempt is resolved. In other words, you say to someone, you have violated this order, you are in jail until you comply with the order. And again, to your listeners, compliance here is Trump turn to Bukele and say, return this guy. There's no foreign policy issue there. You're not undermining El Salvador's sovereignty. This was a deal. This was a commercial deal.
Okay.
I give you $6 million. I should be able to say this guy was wrongfully in your custody.
But let me just ask you a similar question, because we have taken a woman from Tufts, Ramesa Ozark, off the street. She didn't... Ozturk, excuse me. I apologize. Ozturk off the streets. She thought she was going to be killed, apparently, because these people didn't say who they were. And she has no terrorist... she's not a terrorist. She didn't write anything pro-Hamas. She wrote something about Palestine. You're now seeing the so-called, and it really is not the anti-Semitism task force, you asked me, but they're saying now some of these requests from this task force to the universities that you can't have any pro-Palestinian protests, just pro-Palestinian, not anything to do with Hamas. That's a violation of, I would think, the free speech in the United States of America.
Right.
But since Trump is doing all these other things that are illegal and unlawful, why can't he just start arresting all these people and deporting all these people, or putting them in Louisiana prisons if they've been to pro-Palestinian protests? That's all they've done.
But again, sort of break this down again. First of all, the definition of what comprises activities that are inconsistent with American foreign policy could not be broader, right? I mean, this is not just criticizing Israel for Gaza. This is just saying anything that says the Palestinians have a right to exist. The definition is so broad that even the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, has protested some of Trump's activities in this regard. It's so broad, right, to include clearly speech, nothing to do with. I mean, essentially what the Trump administration is saying is anyone who aligns themselves, not acts towards, undermine, aligns themselves with a side that we're not on, is vulnerable, and that would eliminate any critical speech about the government on foreign policy issues.
About anything, it seems like.
That's right. So that was one thing. Is the definition of what comprises anti-Semitism, what comprises aligning with our opponents, is preposterous and offends free speech guarantees. And then again, here there was a lawful way to do this, which is you give her notice that her visa has been withdrawn, give her an opportunity to contest, to raise the First Amendment issues, to raise due process issues. And then, there's nothing about her that would have suggested she wouldn't have gone to court. Your visa has been withdrawn. I'm going to challenge that in court. And then you determine what to do. This notion that they had to grab this woman off the street, again, there was a lawful way of doing this. It would be challenged. It was a First Amendment issue, but there was a lawful way to do this and an unlawful, thuggish way to do it. And Trump is choosing the latter over and over again. And the courts, for the most part, I would say, the courts where you served, are moving with great expedition when it comes to issues that matter to Trump. And Ozturk and Khalil are still in prison.
And a Louisiana judge said he can be deported.
Louisiana.
That's a different. It was an immigration judge that said he can be deported.
Right, and that's important too.
But that's not the end. We got to move on.
Well, we're just going to make sure the laws are different. Immigration court versus the regular court.
Immigration court doesn't have the authority to say this man, the revocation of his visa was unconstitutional. The immigration court is just saying what was the law of immigration. It doesn't have broader authority than that.
So, Nancy Gertner, we've discussed this with you before, but we're bringing it up again because it has been moving at breakneck speed. By my math, somewhere in the neighborhood of $1 billion of free legal services has been promised by some of the most prominent, powerful law firms to the causes favored by Donald Trump. And as we've mentioned on the show quite a few times, when he had that press conference the other day with the coal miners, he made clear what at least one of their assignments pro bono is going to be, is they're going to represent the coal companies getting licenses so they can either reopen, expand, this sort of thing. Can you, I don't know if you use this word, but you probably said something like this. There's no better textbook definition of extortion to me than what Donald Trump is doing to these law firms. And $1 billion of these, I think 6, 7, 8 law firms have said, okay, extort me. Here's the money. Can you explain? Some noble places are doing the right thing and fighting. Can you explain this grotesque capitulation by these lawyers?
No, I can't.
Okay.
I can't explain it. I can't justify it. Let me actually amend that. I can explain it. It's for the money. It's for the money. They are caving in because they want to protect the $1 million, the multi-million-dollar fees that they get. There's no other explanation as to why they would do that. Let me say, though, 346 retired federal and state judges signed on to an amicus brief, a friend of the court brief, protesting what happened to Perkins Coie, one of the firms that have resisted this. So with respect to those that have capitulated, there is a political and a principled issue, which is you don't do stuff like this for the money. You hang on, you stand up. In addition, I think that there are ethical issues to be explored, which is to say, Trump, a non-lawyer, a non-member of the firm, has no right to control the cases they take and the way they litigate. And the implication of some of these agreements is just that. That's actually an ethical violation. So I mean, this is just wrong and outrageous, and resonates with Hungary and, forgive me, Nazi Germany. It's outrageous.
And by the way, in addition to the 360 plus former federal judges, there's somewhere in the neighborhood of 500 law firms that have signed on as well, but not included in that number, at least as of Friday, were the biggest, wealthiest law firms in the country who are not coming to the support of Perkins Coie, which
not
is
all of them. No, I mean, but I think it's still a substantial number of firms that have not capitulated and have fought and are fighting. So, I mean, this is an unimaginable capitulation by the most powerful, especially, I might add, Paul Weiss, which is a firm that was notable for its pro bono work in numbers of areas. I mean, this is pro bono for Trump. This is just unimaginable. I just said there may be an ethical issue. It's also, by the way, that these agreements are incredibly spongy. Trump keeps on changing the goalposts. It's not at all clear what they have agreed to. So that Trump does not. The worst thing of all is that the Perkins Coie lawsuit, there had been a temporary restraining order because the demands of the Trump administration, rather, are on their face illegal. You cannot bar law firms from public places like federal buildings because you don't like the people they represent. That is not even close to lawful. So these firms are capitulating to unlawful demands, which is outrageous.
By the way, speaking of the people they represent, in case you've missed prior segments, some of the horrible things these law firms have done, and I use horrible sarcastically, is represent Dominion voting systems, which won an $800 million deal out of, cut an $800 million deal with Fox News. So obviously they were in the right. The lawyers who represented the mother and daughter who were viciously attacked verbally by Giuliani and Donald Trump.
The guy who employed Robert Mueller.
Right, they won.
Doug Emhoff, Kamala Harris.
And the other part of this, which I think may be an ethical issue, a lot of people who have legitimate claims against the Trump administration said they can't even hire a lawyer. They can't find someone who is willing to take their case to sue the Trump administration for fear that they're going to be going after.
That's the point.
Next.
That's the point.
Yeah.
I mean, if you violate the law as the Trump administration has been found to do, and then you undermine the representation of those who challenge the law, you're on your way to authoritarian power, even if you may already be there. But think about this. I mean, Trump has the authority to deal with security clearances. He can't just dole them out based on someone's First Amendment rights. But so that's one thing. That's in a bucket that's more completely in his zone. But access to public federal buildings, which were included in these threats, that is outrageous. That's like saying I'm going to bar you from the only building where you can litigate your rights and the rights of your clients because I don't like who you represented. It is so unequivocally illegal that it's shocking that these firms.
But again, I think it's so shocking to people who don't know the law like you both do that it's shockingly illegal, and yet it's happened, and it's happening every day, over and over, and.
Well, these firms have chosen. The concept is complying in advance. These firms have chosen not to challenge that which is illegal, which is the way that civil society crumbles before an autocrat.
You know, Nancy Gertner, in the few minutes we have, you wrote a piece for Bloomberg Law. Trump discriminating against blue states sets up historic crisis. What were you and your colleagues saying?
Well, Trump has taken steps that clearly discriminate against the blue states in favor of the red states in numbers of ways. Just closed 5 regional offices of HHS, all were in the blue state areas. If it can be shown that that's exactly what he's doing and that's what the pattern looks like, there's a constitutional provision which the Supreme Court has affirmed that says you can't discriminate against one state. The federal government doesn't have the right to pick and choose among the states. All the states have equal sovereignty before the government. And I say, so that would be another lawsuit that could be that to claim that that's unconstitutional. And if the administration doesn't follow that, the blue states have a considerable amount of leverage. What's that leverage? The money that the blue states pay into the federal treasury is far more than the money they receive in services. And although this would be unlawful, if they threatened to withhold federal tax money, it would be unlawful, to be sure. What he's doing is unlawful as well. But if they threatened to withhold the tax money, federal government could be hurt.
By the way, we have the governor on April 25th. Yeah. I promise you, from Gertner through us to Healy, we're going to broach that on the 25th.
Right. Again, it would be, I want to make it
clear. Understand.
That would be illegal. There's no question about it. And it would be sort of a break point for the Republic. But arguably what Trump is doing is likewise illegal. And if courts don't stop him from using his power unequally with the blue states and the red states, then, I mean, something needs to be done.
Well, I love in your piece.
It would be illegal.
In the piece in Bloomberg, you quote Alabama Senator Katie Britt. People may recall she's the one that gave the very breathy speech. What do they call it?
Response to the state.
Yes, in her kitchen.
Right. In her kitchen.
Like they're very breathy. Anyway, she's upset about any possible federal funds that would disrupt the, quote, groundbreaking research at high-achieving institutions like those in Alabama, unquote. Now, I'm going to sound like a Boston snob, but I would argue that the research probably going on at Harvard and Yale and Princeton and my alma mater, Stanford, is probably greater than the groundbreaking research going on any place in Alabama.
But that's the interesting pattern, which is that there are some funding issues that are nominally national. But Trump, we believe, will respond to the cries of the red states. Then there are some things that he's doing that seem to be completely discriminating against the blue states, like closing of regional HHS offices only in Boston, New York, California, Washington State. This has been, the pattern is clear. He doesn't have a right to do that. That would be unconstitutional. And the question is, the courts would be the first to stop him. And then the question is where you go if the courts don't work. And that's an open question.
Last thing, we only have 30 seconds. You are now on the advisory board of some sentencing stats thing. What is it and why are you doing this?
This is an organization that can describe the way the federal courts are behaving, particularly in criminal cases. They can identify not just the averages that the average sentences, but also which courts are paying attention to addiction and trauma. And in other words, they can analyze sentencing in a way and with a degree of sophistication that no other entity can do. And so I'm interested in that because that's the field that I write in.
Would you like, Judge Gertner, would you like to hear Jim's Katie Britt impression?
Oh, I did a Katie Britt imitation.
Yeah, before you go,
it's quite good.
We have the sound.
Here it is.
Here it is.
We see you. We hear you. Jim. We stand by you.
Wait, was that me or Katie Britt? Who was
I
that?
think that was you, Jim.
Judge Gertner,
Yeah.
it's sentencingstats.com. It's great to see you. We'll see you soon. Thanks so much
Thank
for your
you
time.
very much for joining us.
Thank you.
We have been speaking with retired federal judge Nancy Gertner. She's a senior lecturer at Harvard Law School and a Boston Public Radio contributor. We're very grateful for her time. Coming up after
Excellent
a quick
imitation
break.
by me, by the way.
That was excellent. Yeah, I
Thank
thought it was a
you.
little bit more breathy than that.
No. That's pretty good, too.
Yeah.
No,
Anyway,
because mine
Globe
was
travel writer Christopher Muther is going to talk about Americans pursuing dual citizenship under Trump 2.0, how Canadians are receiving American tourists, and he's going to tell us about White Lotus. It just wrapped up the season, and as we know, Christopher Muther actually visited the hotel, or at least one of them anyway, where White Lotus was filmed. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Alrighty, here it goes again. Pop band OK Go is back with a new record, their first in 10 years.
This actually feels like the most comfortable in our skin I think we've ever sounded.
I'm Elsie Chang. We'll hear from OK Go on their latest album and the adjacent possible on All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And Rockland Trust Bank, helping foster healthy relationships with money by providing education and resources to the community, one neighborhood at a time. Rockland Trust Bank, where each relationship matters. Member FDIC. And Porter Square Books, hosting poet Martin Espada with his new collection of poems, Jailbreak of Sparrows, April 23rd at 7. Registration information at portersquarebooks.com.
Music. That's it. Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marge Regan, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Ken Burns and Sarah Botstein join us tomorrow talking about the American Revolution, their upcoming film, I think in the fall. Joined now on Zoom by Boston Globe travel writer Christopher Muther, whose latest claim to fame is surviving a trip to the White Lotus in Thailand. You also obviously know him as the authority on cruise line swinger culture. Christopher, good to see you. Welcome. How are you?
I'm good. I wish I were more of an authority on cruise line swinging. I think maybe that's what I need to be working on for my bio.
Yeah,
So,
well, there's always time. There's always time. But
Sure.
Christopher, so White Lotus wrapped up its third season last Sunday. Some people loved it, some people hated it. But how much of that, the rooms with the pools outside, the nice teak decks? I mean, was that where you got to visit?
That's exactly where I was. I mean, now everyone has kind of seen it. They kind of know what it's all about. Yeah, I stayed in two of the hotels that were used for filming. So, Belinda,
Gorgeous hotels.
one of the characters was in a hotel in Phuket, which was two hotels were used, but it was seamlessly made to appear as one hotel. So there's one in the island of Koh Samui, another on the island of Phuket. So anything that was wellness related was Phuket. Anything that was related to the rest of the show was Koh Samui. So in my brain, I kept thinking, that's where I did this, that's where I did that. It took a while for me to get into the show because I was so disconnected because I could see it was two different places. To me, it was quite obvious. To no one else, it would be.
All those monkeys, did you see the little monkeys that were swinging from the trees?
I have to say that I did not see a single monkey.
Oh, no.
At either hotel. So I think that was more of a editorial decision, a trick of the director.
The big
writer.
lizards? The big lizards?
I definitely saw lizards,
Okay.
yes.
All right.
Plenty of lizards.
Any more animal questions for Christopher?
No, just because they were featured prominently, the big lizards and the monkeys, every time you turn around. And the lush greenery, I mean, obviously that was there.
How about this? Any upside-down pineapples at that particular Thank you very much. So, Christopher, one of my favorite places to go, as I've discussed with you ad nauseum, love Montreal, love Quebec City, and this all precedes the latest nightmare. Let's do the good news Canada before the bad news Canada. The circus world, which you not only visited, but participated in north of the border. Fill us in.
Yeah, I had no idea. And, I consider myself to be an expert on all things Montreal.
Mm-hmm.
And I had no idea that it's considered sort of like the circus capital of the world. And
Mm-hmm.
not just because of Cirque du Soleil. There's a circus college there. There's several circus troupes. And then they have this massive circus festival every July. It's sort of like the South by Southwest of circus festivals.
Is that so, really?
Yeah, 10 days every summer. It sort of coincides with Jazz Fest. And you can see so many shows. And one of the things that I quickly learned is that circus outside of the US means something very different. It's sort of like burlesque, or it's like ballet or athleticism. It's not like horses and elephants and a ringmaster and that sort of malarkey. It's art. It's a true art form. And so it is like that Cirque du Soleil, but think beyond that. Think like super like edgy, sexy. To me, it was so eye-opening. I had such a good time, and I never considered myself like a circus guy, except that time in high school, someone tried to get me into a freak show in a circus. But
By the way,
that,
I just did a quick Google search. You and Joe Biden are the only people who've used the word malarkey in a sentence in the last 20 years in America. You just did it, and he did it every day, so congratulations. Are any of these circus things free in July, or is it all you got to pay to go?
a lot of it. A lot of it is free. Like, you don't even need to attend any like venue shows to be able to see it. Like, you walk around the streets, and
That's great.
It's everywhere. It's everywhere. It's really just well, as you know, like Montreal festival culture in the summer is incredible, and you don't need to really spend anything. If you want to go, another layer, you can take a class at the Circus College. I learned to swing on a trapeze there.
How terrifying was that?
Oh, it was pretty terrifying. I'm glad I was wearing my adult undergarments that day, because otherwise I would have been prop dusting a bunch of spectators.
So what'd you do? Just swing back and forth with a net? I don't mean just, because I wouldn't do it. Swing back and forth like with a net underneath you? Is that what you did?
I mean, that's kind of how you start with swinging, and then you can kind of, advance to, if you have the upper body strength to hold on and swing from below, or you can swing like from the crook of your knees back. I tried a few things and realized quickly that my best years are behind me, so it's probably not going to be one of those sexy circus performers you'll see.
I've never seen circus in Montreal. I've been to Cirque du Soleil practically every year it comes to town, and other than the fact that it is unbelievably expensive to go, it is the most incredible and creative thing I think I've ever seen in my whole life. It's just really beautiful.
Well, speaking of all things Canadian, how should Americans feel? You wrote a whole piece about this, going to Canada now.
It's interesting because I had emails coming in from readers asking, it was about, 10 or 12 or so, readers asking like about their trips this summer to Canada, because we've all heard about Canadians boycotting travel to the U.S. We know the threats they're hearing right now from the president. There's the tariffs. He's referring to them as the 51st state. So readers were sort of asking me, am I going to be okay? What's the reaction going to be? And at first I thought, it's Canada, it's fine. But then I thought, if people are concerned, I'm going to do what a good reporter does and go up there and ask people. So I spent a weekend in Ottawa just asking strangers, what do you think of Americans, and how do you think Americans are going to be treated this summer when they're in Canada? And this was my favorite reaction. Several people said, we're not going to be as warm to them. So, we'll answer their question, but when they turn around, we're going to talk about them behind their back. This is why I love Canada so much.
But we talk, I don't know who brought this up, who had just been to Canada in our first hour. Wouldn't we do the same if we were treated by their prime minister the way Trump is treating our neighbors, arguably our greatest international friends? It is incredible. And the flip side of that, Marjorie's going to ask me where I'm talking about. I'm not telling you where I'm talking about. I was trying to make a reservation, let's put it this way, at a New England hotel for weeks and weeks, and it was sold out. And I was relentless because I figure you never know if somebody's going to cancel. And I went back a few days ago, And not only was there a room available, there were tons of rooms available. And it is an area, without being
Near the
named,
Canadian
that
border?
a lot of Canadians go to.
Oh, really?
And my assumption is not my assumption. I've read it by you. And Canadians are not coming to the United States either, which is another negative consequence for small business people as a result of the Trump stuff, right?
Yeah, I mean, the U.S. travel industry is going to lose, if they haven't already lost, billions this year because of Canadian and European tourism. And that's not just speculation at this point. This
and
is
Asian tourism too, right?
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Chinese tourism.
I mean,
is
who
huge.
is going to want to come here and risk trouble?
Exactly. Right. There's that's that levels. It's like people, one, worried for their safety. There's trans, LGBT, people of color who are worried about coming to the U.S. There's people who want to make a political statement and don't want to come to the U.S. There's many, many reasons. I have a lot of friends in Canada who have said, I will not step foot in the U.S. until Trump is no longer in office. And not even to visit me. And you think that would be enough of an incentive to come to the U.S., but clearly not.
Most of my friends in Canada have said, were it not for the swinger culture, I wouldn't be coming to America either. But
I've said this before, but why not say it again? I went to the demonstration, so I could talk about it on the radio that was down on Boston Common. I've never been to such
as a journalist, you should say.
Yes, I've never been to such a white demonstration. I mean, I think it was 99.9% white people. Almost no people of color, almost no Asians, no nothing. It was very white. But I wanted to mention...
But you leave that hanging. I mean, we read one of the reasons, primary reasons, people were afraid, people of color were afraid about how they'd be treated.
And there was that meme going around to, keep your black on the couch. Can we say that word? On the couch?
It's part of the hashtag. You can say it.
Yeah, keep your black ass on the couch. And the idea being, we've done enough here protesting. We've made some effort. Let the white people get out and do it this time.
Hey, before we continue with our agenda, one of our coworkers, are you in Miami, as they just told us?
I'm in Miami, yes.
I hadn't been there. I was there like a year ago. I hadn't been there in years and years and years and years. I thought it was fabulous. I mean, I was, and the thing I love the most, I don't know if you've been there. What's the name of that thing? Jared suggested it, where it's this whole neighborhood, which is almost all outside art, murals.
Wynwood.
And what's it called?
It's called Wynwood.
Wynwood. It was fabulous. What do you think of Miami in 2025, Christopher Muther?
I think it's an interesting spot. I'm not a huge Miami fan. I mean, there are neighborhoods of Miami that I love, and overall, it's let's say I like Miami.
What do you not like about it?
Florida.
What do you not like about it?
Well, I mean, so you mentioned Wynwood, and about 10 years ago, Wynwood was fantastic.
It's not anymore?
I was there last year, and they've monetized what was wonderful about it. So you'd walk around and there'd be Shepherd Ferry murals and all like great street art. Now that's sort of all behind basically a paywall.
Oh, it is. Actually, it is. Yeah.
So you have to, before that area was open.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So now you have to pay to go in, and it's just people standing in front of things, taking pictures of themselves, and I want to strangle them all. And
well, I'm glad I really said I loved it. Then go ahead.
But it helps your listeners understand the difference between a skilled travel professional and a grump.
That's right.
And
we're talking to Christopher Muther.
Before we leave the subject, though, you mentioned in your great piece about going to Canada, about the in shops you can find the Canada is not for sale T-shirts and the MAGA subversive Make America Go Away hats. I love that little detail.
On a related note, you also wrote a piece, I think it was before your circus piece appeared, I'm not sure, it doesn't really matter, about a jump, not surprisingly, in dual citizenship stuff. And what amazed me, because a lot of people talk about it and almost nobody does it, but more people are doing it, you quoted a number. I just assumed if you were eligible, you filled out the form, you waited. You said if you want to do a citizenship thing in Malta, I think it was, you have to invest $820,000 in real estate or in some business in the country?
If you don't have an ancestry tie
Okay.
And you want it's what's called a golden visa, which is a way to sort of get you in. Malta's one of the one of the easiest, but one of the most expensive. A lot of people are doing Greece, where the buy-in starts at about $250.
Meaning this is where you don't have a Greek or Maltese ancestor. Oh, right. I see. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. If you do have ancestry, it's another ball of wax, but it's not as easy as filling out a form because, well, there are two factors. One is there's so many people now who are looking to do this that consulates are overwhelmed. And countries are even changing their laws now because so many people are doing this from the U.S. Like Italy just changed their requirements. Spain is getting rid of their golden visa program. It's a lot happening. It's sort of like because of the demand. In Spain, for instance, it was a worry about driving up real estate prices because you have wealthy people coming and buying houses because they want to have dual citizenship Spain. So it'll be interesting to see. Portugal is also a big one. It'll be interesting to see if they adapt given the numbers going up.
How about Ireland?
Ireland is huge as well. They haven't made any changes as far as I know yet, but obviously, especially for the Boston area, there's a lot of.
That's right.
But I would say to anyone listening who's remotely interested in seeking dual citizenship to start now. It takes years to do. It's a minimum of 2 years. It's not as if you're going to go fill out a form, send in a check, and you'll get a passport in a few weeks. It's quite a process.
So, talking to Christopher Muther.
So tell us about this Maine hotel that apparently is one of the snazziest Time Magazine's World's Greatest Places of 2025.
Time Magazine?
Yes.
Who cares? Does Time Magazine even exist?
Well, I think it exists enough to say if it's on the 2025 Greatest Places list.
Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Interested.
Okay. Tim, you're sounding a lot like our president. I think, didn't he say the other day, does Time Magazine
exists?
He did?
That's right.
Okay,
so I may be like Biden saying malarkey, and now you're like Trump saying
that's beautiful. Thank you for that.
We've got a good counterpoint going on here.
Thank you. What's the Maine hotel deal?
It's called the Viewpoint Hotel, and it's kind of this incredible feat of architecture for Maine. You think of Maine as sort of like quaint places, but Viewpoint has this. It basically was carved. Part of it was carved into cliffs.
Oh my God!
Overlooking the ocean, so you have like a fantastic view of Nubble Lighthouse right across from you. It's really stunning. The folks who own this hotel own a few other places, and they have sort of a off the charts level of taste and sophistication.
What does that mean? What does that mean?
They're gorgeous.
So I wrote a story last year about another place they did called the Nevada Hotel, which they sort of saved this old kind of cool Art Deco looking building that was going to get raised for condos, and now it's like just they've completely restored it. So they're really like invested in the community and doing these sort of forward-looking projects. So the Viewpoint is fantastic. It's interesting that it was named one of the world's greatest places. I don't know if I've been a few places in the world for work, of course, and I don't know if I would list the hotel as one of the greatest places, but it's kind of cool.
And Lady Gaga's sister got married there, so it's a great place to get married, obviously, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm looking at the prices and the view. I mean, it's a beautiful spot. I'm looking online.
It is gorgeous.
It's totally affordable. I mean, it's not insane at all, is it?
It's, high season, it's a little pricey. Low season.
So now we're in low season because it's still cold and crappy. Is that it?
Yeah. Okay. We're sort of like entering shoulder season as it gets warmer.
Shoulder season.
Shoulder season.
I never heard that term. That's great.
And so it can be, high season. You're going to pay a lot more than you will this time of year. But yeah, it's not like raffles or like high luxury prices. And it's a beautiful, beautiful spot.
Hey, it's good to see you. Do you like anything about Miami? I can't remember. Do you like anything or no? No?
I do. I like lots of things about Miami.
Like, name one.
The Art Deco architecture.
That's good. That's actually good.
Thank you very much,
Come
Christopher
home
Muther.
soon. Nice to see you, Christopher Muther.
We have been speaking with Boston Globe travel writer Christopher Muther. We're probably going to read something about Miami in the Boston Globe written by Christopher very soon. Coming up after a quick break, just enough time for two more things. And if Jim talks fast, he can say his too. You listen to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Even after launching its own legal games, the Mass State Lottery still faced stiff competition from the mob. So they got a little help from their friends at the FBI, who had plans to bug the headquarters of the Boston Mafia.
It was almost like a clubhouse. They had a big dining room table.
How they pulled it off on this week's episode of Scratch and Win.
I was going and buying all these batteries at Sears. They didn't know what I was doing with them.
Tomorrow night at 9 on GBH 89.7.
Support for our programs comes from you.
And the Newman School in the heart of Back Bay, dedicated to being a spirited community for local and global teachers and learners, now enrolling middle school day students and 5-day boarding high school students. NewmanBoston.org. And Seasons 4, the outdoor living store in Lexington, featuring over 100 styles of outdoor furniture delivered throughout New England, plus a wide selection of plants, statuary, and garden accessories. April event in progress. Seasons4.com.
Right, we have new music. Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marge Regan and Jim Browdy. Streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Ken Burns, Sarah Botstein, working a film, American Revolution. They'll join us tomorrow in person at the library. But it's first time for two more things. What's your thing, Marjorie?
Okay, this is this great story by Billy Baker, who's a great writer for the Globe. It's out of Rockport. The culprit, he says, is a bird or birds, or perhaps it's the great bird apocalypse of 2025. What's happened is this woodpecker, big woodpecker, crow-sized, with a bright red crest on the back of its head, is going around the neighborhood, smashing the side view mirrors in the cars throughout the neighborhood. In one case, it actually cracked a windshield. The guy whose windshield was cracked says, I was cleaning the windshield, wiping off inside the car, wiping off the seats and the dash. I thought my girlfriend was knocking on the window, but he looked up and it was this woodpecker smashing his head into the windshield. And like I said, somebody said it was the size of King Kong. It's not actually that big. One of the neighbors said, this is Terry Francis. She says, he's the cutest thing, though, even though they all have to run around the neighborhood putting like sheets and plastic around the mirror so the bird can't get it. But she says what he does is he hops on the door handle of the car, makes his way along the rubber rim at the base of the side window, then gets into the mirror and bang, bang, bang. It's mating season. This is what they think is going on. And the birds are like they're all jacked up on testosterone, and they think that this is the time you have to look out for these birds smashing your side windows. So here's the upside to this, Jim. The neighbors say, well, they have lost their side mirrors and they're kind of upset about it. They've had to wrap them in pillowcases and other stuff to keep the woodpecker from getting them. But it says one of the neighbors, it's turned into such a nice thing for the neighborhood because it's getting neighbors to talk to each other. It's a nice break from politics and the stock market and the Karen Reed trial. And they think that that is an improvement.
That's a lovely story. It is. Did you watch Woody Woodpecker when you were a little kid?
I probably did. I don't remember.
Neither did I. Okay, so it's a bad week for political corruption. Actually, maybe a good week for political corruption. Boston City Councilor Tanya Fernandez Anderson pled guilty. You know this, to 2 of 6 federal corruption charges. What did she do? Well, she gave her best friend a $14,000 taxpayer-funded bonus, had her kick back $7,000 to her. This is after having hired her sister and son and being assessed a $5,000 penalty for the ethics violation. Then there was the arrest of State Rep Christopher Flanagan from the Cape. You ever hear him, Marjorie?
I've heard of him now.
I hadn't heard of him, but I have now too. Allegedly stole thousands from his employer to pay for clothes, household appliances, and a psychic. Obviously not a very good psychic. They could have told him he wouldn't get away with it. And this is legal corruption I'm going to do now. Those are illegal. Huge expenditures by state legislators, we've learned this in the Globe, whining and dining unnamed people, likely lobbyists and colleagues, but we're not entitled to know who they are. Having donations go to nonprofits they run, so again, no disclosure of the donor, or killing bills for your girlfriend lobbyists, then being promoted. So the spate of corrupt behavior, whether it's legal or illegal, gives leeway to those who choose to say, hey, Trump and sexual assault, no big deal. His 30-plus felonies, so what? And for those who casually say, well, they all do it, they all don't. but enough do that they don't just cause lack of respect and trust in their institutions, but in all government institutions. So I guess my advice to Pauls is steal less, not just for self-preservation, but for the preservation of our democracy. Don't you agree when there are a lot of stories like that it trickles down?
Yeah.
And basically it's not just Fernandez Anderson. It's not just this Flanagan character. It's not just Representative Roy who's doing favors allegedly for his girlfriend lobbyist. It becomes everybody's doing it. And when you don't believe in those institutions, someone like Trump comes along and basically he can rip them down.
I think the city
shame on all
council
of them.
thing was discouraging to people because she was the first undocumented immigrant to become a city
First
councilor.
Muslim, first
And,
undocumented.
Yeah, and I
that's
think
right.
that really disappointed people. Anyway, coming up after the 1 o'clock news, Princeton's Khalil Gibran Muhammad, we're going to talk to him about Trump's crackdown on all these universities, what Princeton is doing about it. We're also going to talk about how the administration is getting rid of books about African Americans, but not books about Nazis. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Cozy up with a good book at GBH's virtual book club, Beyond the Page. Here's how it works. Check out any of the books by this month's featured author. Then join us for a virtual discussion with the author. Learn more at gbh.org/events.
Support for GBH comes from you.
And Johnson & Wales University, now offering 3-year career-focused bachelor's degrees in graphic design, computer science, criminal justice, and hospitality management. More at jwu.edu. And M&M Skylights, located in Stoneham, installing and servicing the full range of Velux skylights that can help bring air and more natural light into your home. Skylight consultations can be scheduled at mmskylights.com.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News. What matters to you?
I'm Jim Browdy, head on Hour 3 of Boston Public Radio. Across the river at Harvard, university officials have a new list of demands from Donald Trump, who wants him to strip any efforts around diversity, equity, and inclusion and more with billions of federal funding on the line. We'll talk to Princeton's Khalil Gibran Muhammad about why some presidents are standing up, like his at Princeton, which schools are rolling over for Trump, like Columbia, and why some are remaining silent, like Harvard.
I'm Marjorie Egan. Then we'll end with you opening the phone and text lines. With 1 day to go before the annual tax filing deadline, Jim's insisting we dig up an old, moldy chestnut. Taxes, paying them, avoiding them. With the liars and cheats in charge in Washington and Musk-led Doge firings at the IRS, is cutting corners on taxes count as patriotic protest? Not that we'd ever condone that sort of thing, of course. Weigh in next on the third hour of Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Windsor Johnston. President Trump is meeting with the president of El Salvador at the White House at this hour. During a meeting in the Oval Office, President Nayib Bukele said he cannot return a migrant from Maryland who was wrongfully deported to El Salvador.
Of course, I'm not going to do it. It's like, the question is preposterous. How can I smuggle a terrorist into the United States? I don't have the power to return him to the United States.
Kilmar Abrego Garcia was mistakenly deported by Immigration and Customs Enforcement in March, despite a Supreme Court ruling directing the Trump administration to facilitate his return. El Salvador maintains custody of him. The man's family continues to push for his release, stressing his lack of criminal history and the dangers he faces in El Salvador. The House and Senate will try to advance a spending bill this week without exploding the deficit. NPR's Mara Liasson reports the House narrowly passed the budget framework last week that calls for extending tax cuts while allowing for trillions of dollars in federal borrowing.
This week, lawmakers from both chambers need to figure out how to make the numbers add up. One option is using a budgetary sleight of hand and simply declaring that the tax cuts don't add to the deficit. Or, if lawmakers really want to reduce spending, they could cut Medicaid. But many Republicans and President Trump have promised not to do that. The other pressure on lawmakers is that the bond market is raising yields, the interest bondholders charge for financing U.S. debt. Because, among other things, it doesn't see the U.S. getting its fiscal house in order. In other words, bondholders see the U.S. debt getting bigger and bigger with no credible plan to rein it in. Mara Liasson, NPR News.
Russia is defending Sunday's missile strikes on the Ukrainian city of Sumy, while Ukraine says the attacks killed 34 civilians and wounded more than 100 more. Russia says it was legitimately targeting a military installation. NPR's Charles Maines reports from Moscow.
In a statement, Russia's defense ministry said its forces had successfully fired 2 Iskander-M tactical missiles at a gathering of Ukrainian military officers in Sumy. The ministry tacitly acknowledged civilian casualties as well, accusing Ukraine of using civilians as human shields by placing military targets in densely populated areas. Ukraine has demanded a tough international response over the attack, which came amid wider U.S. efforts to negotiate a peace in Ukraine. President Trump condemned the airstrike as horrible, but suggested Russia had mistakenly hit civilians. Trump administration officials also point to the Sumy attack as the latest reason why they're working to end the conflict. Charles Maines, NPR News, Moscow.
Stocks are trading higher on Wall Street at this hour. The Dow is up 140 points. This is NPR News in Washington.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. Beacon Hill lawmakers revisiting legislation that would expand who's protected under Massachusetts hate crime laws. The bills under consideration would add sex and gender to the list of protected classes that are covered when it comes to hate crimes, triggering tougher penalties for those who are convicted. State Rep Michelle Dubois says that she thinks the legislation is ripe for passage this session.
Massachusetts is the only New England state that does not include this definition already. And I believe last time I looked, there are only 12 states in the United States that do not include this in their hate crime criminal code.
State law does require that gender be included in hate crime data reporting. Some lawmakers on Beacon Hill calling for State Rep Chris Flanagan to resign. This after the Cape Cod Democrat was arrested Friday for allegedly stealing thousands of dollars from his former employer, some of which helped bankroll his political campaigns. Politico reports that Flanagan pleaded not guilty to federal fraud charges on Friday, accusing him of stealing $36,000 from the Home Builders Association, where he previously worked, from November 2021 to January 2023. Among those calling for Flanagan to step down are Massachusetts Governor Maura Healey and State Senator Julian Cyr, a fellow Cape Cod Democrat who says that he does not see how Flanagan can continue to serve the people of Brewster, Dennis, and Yarmouth for the good of his constituents and family. He says he must resign. One person not calling for Flanagan to resign is his boss, House Speaker Ron Mariano. He's taking a wait-and-see approach. 62 degrees in Boston. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Charles Schwab, offering investors choices like full-service wealth management, advice, investing, and trading on Think or Swim. Learn more at schwab.com. And from the Doris Duke Foundation.
He is Jim Braude. I am Marjorie Egan. Welcome to hour number 3 of Boston Public Radio. We're going to be back at the Boston Public Library tomorrow. We're streaming all the time on youtube.com/GBH News, but at the library, we're going to be joined in person by legendary filmmaker Ken Burns and Sarah Botstein. They're going to tell us about their new work on the American Revolution and the shot heard 250 years ago this week, just a little bit north and west of us here. Jim, hello again.
Hey there, Marjorie. So as Harvard professors sue, and let me make clear, not Harvard, as Harvard professors sue over Trump's threat to pull $9 billion in funding, here's an exclusive audio recording of Harvard President Alan Garber's response. Exactly. Meanwhile, at Princeton, where our next guest joins us from, they're singing a different tune. Here's Princeton's president, Christopher Eisgruber, speaking to the New York Times.
It is a crisis, right? I mean, the funding that is essential to the quality of American research and America's universities is under threat. That's a crisis for universities, and it is a crisis for our country. But I will say this, I think even when universities have to concede or make concessions because they may be forced to do that in order to protect people, I think they need to speak up under those circumstances and recognize the principles at stake.
And by the way, Eisgruber went on to say, at Princeton, we will not make concessions. It's essential for us to protect academic freedom. We're joined now on Zoom by Khalil Gibran Muhammad, professor of African American Studies and Public Affairs at Princeton and a visiting professor at Harvard. He joins us regularly. Good to see you. Welcome.
Thanks so much, Jim and Marjorie, for having me back.
Yeah, so you're right in the middle of this mess.
At both places.
Yeah, and Princeton, according to our research, has got a $34.1 billion funding issue that they're facing.
No, $34 billion endowment.
Endowment, yes, endowment, right. But they've got a considerable funding issue, too, if they lose that money. So what's the difference, do you think?
Well, okay, a couple of meaningful differences. One, Princeton is wealthier by virtue of the size of its endowment relative to the size of its operation. And that is, it's just a smaller university with fewer professional schools. Second, Princeton is facing about $500 million in threats of federal funding being taken away. By comparison, Harvard is facing up to $9 billion. So they are not facing exactly the same financial crisis. Eisgruber, in the New York Times podcast interview that Jim opened the show with, actually said that only about $200 million would affect on-campus operations. The remaining half are related to some particles physics operation that is off campus and related to some kind of collaboration with other entities. So the scale of the threat is bigger at Harvard.
But
that's not sufficient to answer the silence, which is to say, the very first conversation we had, I don't know, maybe a year ago, when Claudine Gay was forced to resign, you asked me who I thought might be the next president. I said that I thought, as a betting person, that it would be Alan Garber, and that I thought he'd be the wrong choice. And I think I'm right. I was guessing then, and now we've seen Alan Garber in this role. He was never the right person to navigate what was clearly then a political assault on higher education. And just to quote J.D. Vance, the universities are the enemy. And so here we are.
You think and why is he the wrong person?
Well, I thought that he was an institutionalist, meaning that, he spent 11 years serving 3 presidents following the rules of the university. When you face a crisis where everything that the university stands for is being challenged, and you are facing people who don't play by the rules, you'd need people who actually have to come up with new ideas, who have to take risks. And that's not Alan Garber's MO.
Well, also, I want to take issue, if I may, with your not excuse, because it wasn't an excuse, your explanation of the differences between Harvard and Princeton. Obviously, that you're factually accurate, but we have not heard one word out of Alan Garber at all about this. Again, professors are speaking. The city of Cambridge, through its city council, endorsed this Saturday rally, which, to my knowledge, as a former city councilor member, the city council and the city have never done before, because the threat is so extreme. And if I may get you into the conversation, I will never forget the conversation with you after you're singled out by the chair of the House Education Committee, you and your course at Harvard. Those are the same hearings where Lee Stefanik went after the 3 university presidents. And I asked you how much support you got from Harvard leadership, and I believe your answer was you got one private email from the upper infrastructure, no public support. So they have pretty much decided so far, it seems, to be a place that won't fight. And I assume, I hope I'm proven wrong, but I would assume what they're doing is they're discussing behind the scenes with the Trump people what kind of a deal they can cut, hopefully not as extreme as Colombia's. And even in the situation of Colombia, after they capitulated and agreed to some things that I can't believe they agreed to, a few days later, the Trump administration is talking about going to court to get a consent decree. So essentially the court will monitor their compliance, which is an invasion of freedom that is such that I can't believe that any parent would be dumb enough to send their kid to Columbia University. Is any of what I said unfair there?
No, not unfair at all. You just covered a lot of ground there. So let me start, I think, with something that I think is important for this conversation between the letter that Harvard received on April 3rd, which was similar to the Columbia letter. And by the way, just small digression, since we last spoke, the interim president, Katrina Adams, of Colombia has since stepped down. I mean, that's how dire the situation is. So we now have two former presidents of Columbia University in the wake of the crisis of so-called anti-Semitism that is ruining higher education, which is the talking point of the Trump administration and the Republican Party. So the letter that Harvard received on April 3rd, which prompted the lawsuit that we opened this conversation with, actually is even more dangerous than the one Columbia received. And the reason being is because, just by way of a clear distinction, in the Columbia letter, the demand was to put into receivership a department that combined Middle East studies, South Asian studies, and African studies, which we talked about last time. That, of course, remains to be seen how far they're going to go, although they promised to essentially put a provost over those departments, which is their version of receivership. In the case of Harvard, the language here is incredibly vague. It says essentially oversight of departments and programs that fuel anti-Semitic harassment. So essentially, you've got an open, unspecified claim that much of the university could fall into this trap and therefore never meet the standards of compliance that this latest attack on Harvard and higher education represents by this administration.
Well, can I interrupt you? Let me go ahead. Let me interrupt you.
No, I was just going to say that there's even more reason for Garber to stand up, because now he literally has a set of expectations from governance to leadership to admissions to hiring to disciplinary charges to shutter all DEI programs that is even more punitive and draconian than the demands on Columbia University and impossible to meet.
So let me just say something to you, Khalil Gibran Muhammad. We started talking to you 8 minutes ago. 3 minutes ago, the following story appeared on the Globe website. Harvard says it will not yield to Trump's demands. And here is a letter from the very same Alan Garber 3 minutes ago or thereabouts. I'll read you one critical line. We have informed the administration, meaning the Trump people, that through our legal counsel that we will not accept their proposed agreement. The university will not negotiate over its independence or its constitutional rights. So to use a horribly overused expression, better late than never. And I would like to say that as someone who lives in Cambridge, I don't have as deep a Harvard connection as you've had, I would say the public pressure worked. I think having the university professors organization suing was embarrassing, I would argue, for the president of Harvard, having the city council, having the city, whatever the reason, Garber has staked out a position that, at least as of the moment, seems to be the right one.
That's good news. Better late than never. No question.
It is good news.
I'm really glad.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm glad you shared it in this moment. And, and I'll take a little personal pride that the very criticism I was just making, I can't imagine wasn't the one that Garber had to address, which is to say that they've essentially said, we're going to take over Harvard University, period. We're going to decide what your governance structure should look like. We're going to decide what admissions policies, we're going to decide everything to our liking before you can get this money, which is extortion.
I want to repeat a question we asked you months and months and months ago and update it a little bit. I know this is not original thinking, but Marjorie and I have been saying whether it's law firms, universities, and we've had this discussion with you, rather than trying to stand up by yourself, particularly if you're not as powerful as a Harvard or a Princeton or whatever, why not get together and do things? And it hasn't happened. There are Mount Holyoke, Wesleyan, Brown, Princeton. I'm leaving one or two out, but it's been and now potentially Harvard. Again, we have to see what this language means and how much they're willing to fight. They say, again, to quote Garber, we will not accept their proposed agreement. Does that mean they'll accept a different agreement? I don't know what the language means. But we had Fiona Hill in here last week, who's on the board of overseers at Harvard. And she said, and she had just come from a Board of Overseers meeting, and said what clearly has to happen on all fronts is collective action. We broached that with Jeffrey Sonnenfeld, who used to be at Harvard, now he's at Yale School of Management, and he said to us maybe 2 weeks ago, I know I shouldn't say this to you, but 50 leaders of 50 colleges and universities are meeting this Saturday, which was a week ago Saturday, to discuss this. Is there something happening under the surface in terms of university leaders coming together that you know about that we and others do not?
Absolutely. First, I think we should just start with Christopher Eisgruber, the president of Princeton, who leads a society of university presidents and has been meeting regularly with them. I'm not at those meetings. These meetings are not public, but he has spoken both as the president of Princeton and with some implied representational currency for this organization. One would assume that if he were not speaking so forcefully in defense of academic freedom for his own institution, there would be the kind of boilerplate, I do not speak for the organization for which I am president of. We also know from reporting in the Boston Globe recently, from Hillary Burns and others, that these presidents are starting to essentially talk from the same script, meaning they're beginning to tighten their defenses so that the arguments are more forceful from Danielle Holly at Mount Holyoke, now Brown University's Christina Paxton, Michael Roth continues at Wesleyan University, who we've spoken about many times on this show, to continue to press the case that universities have to litigate and fight back. So I do think for the first time, we are beginning to see an emergent form of collective action amongst university leaders.
And obviously this is, I hope, going to, well, what do you think is going to happen if 10, 20, 30, 40 universities get together and do something big, particularly some universities in red states? What do you think is going to happen?
Well, I think that these universities will call the Trump administration's bluff. I mean, at this point, these have all been threats of federal funding. No university has yet faced an actual cancellation. I mean, we're sort of in this in-between period of the threat and then the compliance. But where this all ends is in court. And the litigants are just mounting, and the cases are mounting. The degree to which several universities fighting collectively in court gives them a much better advantage in terms of legal resources. The case becomes much stronger, and the implications of the outcome of the case, particularly if it arises to the level of a Supreme Court decision, will ultimately and predictably put an end to this.
I totally agree with that.
Maybe they can hire one of those law firms that is standing up.
Whether it's because it'll strengthen other weaker presidents or embarrass weaker presidents into being strong. One last thing before we get to a piece you wrote and the implications of that in U.S. News. Foreign students, in your experience, whether it's Princeton or other, we asked Mayor Wu the other day when she was on last week, I think, what would your advice be to a foreign student who's contemplating going to a school in the Boston area? And as I've said before, it was probably the longest pause that Mayor Wu ever took before answering a question that we asked her. And it's a tough one. What's happening at Princeton or anywhere else you know? And what would you say to a foreign student who is contemplating coming to school in the United States right now in 2025?
Defer admissions.
Really?
If you get in, this is not a good time to come. I mean, people, The most straightforward, on-the-nose response would be, and again, you wouldn't hear it from me, but to the extent that you wanted to be clear to students, if you were in a student-facing student population, my daughter happens to be, well, let me not say that. So I went for reasons that I wanted to understand what are the implications for traveling. And it was for international students, and the advice was very dire. And very limited in terms of what the university can in the end do if a student is targeted at the border trying to come back into this country. So I would say defer. If you get admitted at this time, come back next year. The legal ramifications of all of this will have played themselves out one way or the other, and people can make a smarter decision at that time.
We're talking to Khalil Gibran Muhammad.
So you wrote a piece about what the Smithsonian Museum is doing in its attack on history. And I don't know how many times we said, Jim, after the George Floyd murder, when things like that as an American studies major, I should have known about, like the Tulsa, Oklahoma white supremacist massacre of 1,000 homes burned and stuff in Oklahoma, and this racist attack and hundreds killed, or, well, some people say it wasn't 100, but anyway, between 50 and several hundred. So we weren't learning this kind of history, even at a college level, even if you were an American history major. But what they're telling us, what they're doing on the Smithsonian after this brief period when we began to learn about these kinds of things in the history of African Americans in this country.
Well, listen, the Smithsonian is now close to 200 years old as an institution. The institution is the largest educator of the kind of cultural heritage of this nation. It has everything from a national zoo to a national museum of air and space, and several art and history museums that tell the story of this country, and indeed this country in relation to many parts of the world. Among one of its newest museums is the Museum of African American Museum of History and Culture, a museum that, by the way, was first proposed by Black Civil War veterans in 1915. The museum did not open until 100 years later because the racist beliefs of many Americans at the time were that the story of Black people and their freedom story was a story that challenged white supremacy. And so the textbooks lied, the curricula of many schools and universities in this country lied, and so too did many museums. And it took a long time for this museum to open. And indeed, part of why I wrote the piece is because Trump's executive order that claims to restore sanity and to get rid of an anti-American divisive race ideology embedded in Smithsonian museums, of which singles out the Smithsonian's African American History Museum, is a sharp departure from Republican Party leadership, including George W. Bush, who authorized the creation of the museum, along with senators like Kansas Senator Brownback, who celebrated the museum for its ability to help Americans understand the original sin of American slavery. And of course, Tim Scott, who at the time was the first Black Republican since Ed Brooke of Massachusetts to serve in the U.S. Senate and is still now the longest serving Black senator, said every American must visit this museum. So the question I ask in the piece is what changed? And what changed is a fascist president and regime that is waging a war on education and truth and sees the museum and many other parts of the Smithsonian system as a threat to his agenda.
You know, in a parallel thing, which I think happened after you wrote the piece, we've read about
Pete
Hegseth's decision at the Naval Academy Library. I know why the caged bird sings. Maya Angelou is gone. Memorializing the Holocaust, about female victims of the Holocaust gone, and the bell curve in Mein Kampf are still there. And to his credit, because I want to think that he's as great as his colleagues tell us on the show he is, Hakeem Jeffries, the leader of the Democrats in the House, responded to this, criticizing Hegseth for banning the books addressing slavery, civil rights, etc., and the Holocaust. Here is what Jeffries had to say.
DEI hires in the Trump administration, like Pete Hegseth, the so-called Secretary of Defense, dumb effing individuals, continue to try to test our resolve and cancel our history. We're going to keep the pressure on until this book ban is reversed and Pete Hegseth is fired.
If you didn't get that reference, DEI, dumb effing individuals, is the point that Congressman leader Jeffries meant. You know, I didn't realize we had Kevin. Is it Kevin Young who ran the Schomburg Center for a while?
Yes, after me.
Yeah,
Correct.
we I didn't know that you had run. Can you tell people
about
what it is? You
Yeah.
mention it in your piece.
Yeah, so I ran an organization that's now turning 100 this year. It opens in 1925 by a Puerto Rican immigrant to the United States. At the time, Puerto Rico was not part of the United States. He comes in 1891. He's been told that Black people have no history, and he's going to dedicate the rest of his adult life to disproving it. He collects books wherever he can find them that are written by Black people or about people, Black people. It becomes the core of an institution today called the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture. His name was Arturo Alfonso Schomburg. And that institution really seeds much of the intellectual work and knowledge production that we would generally put under the heading of African American or African diaspora studies. I just have a note on those book bannings. I looked at the list. It's about 10 pages long, about 400 books. And about a third of the books that I teach in my controversial class that Virginia Fox singled out are listed. So kudos to the Nimitz Library of the Naval Academy that now no longer has these books. I also want to point out there are several Harvard colleagues on that list. Robin Bernstein, Randall Kennedy, Imani Perry, Frank Dobbin, and several of my Princeton colleagues. So this is how absurd the attack on knowledge is. That has nothing to do with what they claim it is, which is protecting people from Marxist and lunatics and anti-Semitism.
Yeah, before you go, one last thing about your piece. Can you share with people what you wrote about the Schomburg Center vis-a-vis James Baldwin?
Yeah.
That was great. Can you mention that?
So the Schomburg, I mean, Jim and Marjorie, you'll both appreciate this. I mean, the Schomburg Center incubated talent as varied as James Baldwin, who famously claimed to have read every book in the library because it helped him understand the life that he was living and the world outside and beyond it. But also people like Paul Robeson, W.E.B. Du Bois, Harry Belafonte and Sidney Poitier met there as teenagers. They were both growing up in Harlem. They both fell in love with another teenager named Ruby Dee, who ultimately chose another teenager, Ozzie Davis, to become her lifelong husband. They were all parts of a special theater program that was incubated at the Schomburg Library.
Wow.
It's pretty great. People should check it out.
Yeah.
You should check it out.
Well,
Your
we're
piece
happy.
is great, and people should read it. It's in U.S. News.
We don't know all the details, but I think if Harvard had totally caved, I would have been beside myself. So at least it looks like this is not a total cave. I hope.
We'll see.
We'll see.
We'll see. Yes.
We'll see. And we'll see you soon, too. Thanks so much for your time. It's great to see you as always. Be well.
Take care.
We have been speaking with Khalil Gibran Muhammad, professor of African American Studies and Public Affairs at Princeton and a visiting professor at Harvard. So as we said at the beginning, he's right in the thick of this whole mess. Coming up after a quick break, tomorrow's tax day. So we're digging up a Jim Moldy chestnut. He wants to talk about this. Cheating on taxes. It's never good, obviously, but if there was ever a year to do it, perhaps 2025 is the year. You have a little time left. Cooking the Books and You is next. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, live at the... Well, no, we're not live. We're streaming at youtube.com/GBH
Well, we are
News.
live.
We're live streaming, that's right.
Alrighty, here it goes again. Pop band OK Go is back with a new record, their first in 10 years.
This actually feels like the most comfortable in our skin I think we've ever sounded.
I'm Elsa Chang. We'll hear from OK Go on their latest album and the Adjacent Possible on All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And Liberty Mutual Insurance. Liberty believes progress happens when people feel secure and exists to help people embrace today and pursue tomorrow. Learn more at libertymutual.com. And the Boston Speakers Series, announcing its 2025-2026 season at Symphony Hall for 7 evenings, featuring Dr. Anthony Fauci, Tipping Point author Malcolm Gladwell, Ken Burns, and conservation photographer Christina Mittermeier. bostonspeakers.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Gunn. I'm getting to like the music. Streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We're at the library tomorrow with Ken Burns, Sarah Botstein. Their film on the American Revolution is coming out soon, and they will join us in person. By the way, we're going to introduce this topic about tax day in a second, but a lot of you are writing about what you think about the new music. Keep doing it. If you text us about it, don't call us. Text us about it. We will share some of those texts. A good friend of ours just texted, and she said, I thought I was listening to the Grand Ole Opry, is what she said.
Somebody else thought they were listening to the wrong station. The new music sounds like it was composed by AI.
I thank you.
Or A1, as in A1 steak sauce. Nina from Putnam, do we have new music? Yes, we do. The little symbol there, I don't get the symbol.
Okay, fine.
Pay the music royalty. I mean, everybody's texting about the same thing, Jim.
Okay, so keep texting and we'll read some of them.
Okay.
Tomorrow's tax day, the deadline to file your taxes to the feds, unless you get an extension, I'm not going to give you a headache. But even if you get yours in on time, will there be anyone left at the IRS to review them? In February, as you know, the Trump-Musk administration's Doge kids laid off, I think it was somewhere in the neighborhood of 7,000 employees from the agency. I think it was those who'd worked there less than a year or two or something. A judge ordered the administration to reinstate those people, but it's still working its way through the court system. And while the rest of us still need to play by the rules and get our tax documents in order, the strain on the IRS means audits of the wealthiest among us will likely be dropped, of anybody, considering they require far more resources. That's according to Brookings. So, how are you feeling about your taxes this year? Did you get them in early in hopes to avoid some of the chaos? Are you filing for an extension? Or maybe you've decided this year you cooked the books. There's nobody there to audit you anyway. Let's not forget this city has a strong history of protesting unjust taxation and monopolization of wealth. Will the Boston Tea Party make a modern comeback? So tax filing and you, 877-301-8970. We have to do the mandatory disclaimer. We are not tax experts. Well, I sort of am. Marjorie's not a lawyer. We're not condoning breaking any federal laws. Are we or are we not?
We are not.
We're not. Unless you have Supreme Court sanctioned immunity, in which case you can break any law you want. 877-301-8970. Now, in a survey done by the IRS themselves, 84% of filers said cheating was not acceptable. I'll say two things about that. One, do you believe that 16% said to the IRS that cheating was acceptable? That's number one. And number two, if 16% admit to the IRS that cheating is acceptable, would you not agree the number of people who actually think cheating is acceptable is much higher? Is that correct?
I think the vast majority of people don't cheat because they're afraid of getting caught.
Have you ever cheated on your taxes?
I don't think so.
Have you ever cheated on your taxes?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, and if you
have you ever cheated on your taxes, Jim?
Are you kidding me? I would never do that.
Okay,
I'm
never do that.
law-abiding. Now, let me say the next thing. Do you,
Jim does his own. Didn't you do your own taxes for
I don't
years?
anymore. I did.
You did.
I did. Now, let me ask you another thing. Mm-hmm. If you were convinced by a power of great authority whom you trusted totally that if you cheated, you could get away with it, would you cheat?
No, I would not.
Why not?
Well, because for one thing, I'm on the radio talking about President Trump all the time, and I've got enough worries without having him deport me for cheating on my taxes.
Okay, fine. So, by the way, an anonymous texter says, I'm not sure what's worse, the new music or you encouraging people to cheat on their taxes. We're not encouraging anybody to cheat on their taxes.
With all the scary changes in our lives, the texter says, the old GBH music was very comforting. Please.
Thank you. Okay, enough of that. Now, here is Donald Trump. Sort of, I would say, bragging about not paying taxes during one of his 2016 debates with, you remember Hillary Clinton?
I do.
Hillary Clinton, here it is.
Maybe he doesn't want the American people, all of you watching tonight, to know that he's paid nothing in federal taxes, because the only years that anybody's ever seen were a couple of years when he had to turn them over to state authorities when he was trying to get a casino license, and they showed he didn't pay any federal income tax. So
that makes me smart.
Well, there it is. So obviously he was bragging about not paying any taxes.
Well, I think it had to do with he lost so much money all the time. He was always losing money.
That's great.
And that's part of the reason he...
877
might have been
301-8970. Have you ever cheated on your taxes? If you do cheat on your taxes or ever have, what was your motivation? Was it economic? Was it political? Was it because you thought you could get away with it? Was it sticking it to the man? And if you don't cheat on your taxes, is it because you're a moral person? Or what is it all about? 877-301-8970. 8970 is the question.
Amber from Worcester says, I owe this year, and I'm glad about that. I don't want big balls having my checking account information.
We haven't talked. Who is Big Balls again? Remind
people.
One
of the Doge kids.
One of the Doge kids,
I think he's 19. Maybe he's 20 by now. Can't drink yet, legally anyway.
So let me ask you, you've never cheated on your tax. I'm sorry.
I've never cheated on my... Have you ever cheated on your taxes?
No, I have not.
Okay.
I would never.
I've never cheated on mine.
Okay, well...
Never.
Okay.
Never.
Are you telling the truth?
Never. You did them for a while, Jim.
I did assist
did you
Marjorie.
Cheat on my taxes?
I did assist
on
Marjorie with her. No, I actually did not.
I signed on the dotted line. I assumed everything was on the up and up.
Okay, 877-301-8910. And by the way, we're not telling anybody who you are, so be honest. If you have cheated
this person
along
says
the margins,
they've
what?
never owed more in federal taxes than they do this year. And I'm too much of a rule follower to anything about it. Do people owe more in federal taxes this year?
No, not that I know of.
Okay.
Well, maybe that person had a better year. Is that possible?
That could be possible.
That's very possible.
All right, Susie in the car.
By the way,
and
so there are three things you can call about. Have you ever cheated on your taxes?
Mm-hmm.
1. 2, what do you think of the new music? Don't call about that. Just text. And 3, do you believe Marjorie when she says she's never cheated on her taxes? Let's go to Susie in the car. You're first. Welcome to the show, Susie. Hi.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, I haven't called before. And
well, that's good.
I'm going to give you a fourth one. I'm a resident of Massachusetts, been here since 1985.
Yeah.
And I would be all for Massachusetts keeping our federal taxes and using it for the services that the feds are trying to take away from us.
Me too.
Susie, were you listening to Judge Gertner when she was on before?
Today? No.
Yeah. Okay,
that
Judge
was her
Gertner,
idea.
Well, we should be careful with that. Judge Gertner said almost all the blue states pay much more to the federal government
the
than
red
they get
states
back.
get a lot of money
For
from
example,
the federal
Kentucky
government
with
because
Mitch
they can't
McConnell.
support themselves.
Okay,
And
exactly.
the blue states make all the money, which is interesting, and they send the money to the federal government.
So she was not arguing that people, it would be illegal, she made clear.
Yes, she did.
But it'd be interesting if a state decided to protest and not send their money to Washington and just keep it for themselves. So,
Yeah.
Susie, thanks for the call. We
I
appreciate
love
it.
that fact.
What's that?
The people in the blue states make all the money and
Pay all the money.
Pay all the money, and the red states have to get bailed out by the federal government.
Yeah,
on a
and
regular
again, the
basis.
most egregious example is Kentucky, the home of Mitch McConnell, who was the Republican leader, I think, for longer than any Republican leader in Senate history. 877-301-8970. I believe I don't know who said this, one of our coworkers, obviously. I believe Marjorie's never cheated on Jim's taxes. I also believe Jim definitely cheated on Marjorie's taxes. That would be Zoe. I did not cheat on your taxes.
Another texter says, Jim, I don't think you can deduct the food at the hot bar as a business expense.
Well, that's your opinion. I think you can. So we have an honest difference of opinion.
Okay.
Let's go to Mark in wherever you are. Where are you? Dennis. Hi, Mark.
Hi, Mark.
Hello.
You there, Mark?
Say something, Mark.
Mark seems to have
Okay.
disappeared.
I think we're bothering
I'm sorry.
him. 877-301-8970. When you
Sarah
file,
in
since I
Newton.
haven't done your taxes in a few years, do you file I assume, knowing you as I do, with 1 minute to go till midnight?
Well, it's funny you should mention that. I just sent in my extension.
Is that really true?
Actually, my tax preparer
By the way,
sent in my extension.
Can I explain that to people? Since I am a tax expert,
You
as
are
you
a
would
tax
say,
expert.
you can get an automatic extension
Yep.
till October 15th.
Right.
However, what's the however,
If you owe
Margaret?
money, you got to pay it
Yeah.
now. Otherwise, you'll be charged interest.
Yeah,
So,
I'm winking as
yeah.
you say that.
I paid my money.
You did pay your money?
I owed money to
Pays your
Massachusetts.
money and you takes your
I owe
chances.
my money to Massachusetts.
Okay, Mark, was that the same guy? Mark and Dennis, we're trying you
Hi,
again?
Mark.
Hello.
Yeah, hi, I'm here.
Well, we're glad to hear it.
you're
What's
attacked
up?
No, so my thing is the gray area in between. Remember when Jerry Brown ran for president back in the 80s, and he was like a 15% tax break, and he brought out the wheelbarrows with all the IRS bullshit. Sorry, can't say that.
You're not supposed to.
I have really, really good accountants in New York, and they have always found a legal way for me to pretty much not pay taxes on a lot of money.
Whoa,
always
what
been
does
legal.
that mean?
Well, that means that, when I was making a lot of money in Hollywood, I paid 12.5% federal and state together. And it was all, they didn't fudge numbers, but they always found a way to get it. And so to me, it's like with Trump, not a fan, but the fact is that millionaires and billionaires, and I was lucky enough to be with an accountant firm, and they actually found a way to completely legally only pay that amount of money.
Wow.
And everybody else got screwed.
That's very impressive.
Well, I mean, clearly, if you can afford a high-priced accountant or lawyer, there are legal loopholes through which you can crawl. Would you? That's fair to say, Mark, isn't it? Yep.
Yes, yeah, but it begs the question is that we should fix that. Is like when I lived in Hong Kong, it was a postage stamp. You put in 15% of what you made, and that's what you paid. It
Flat
literally,
tax.
the entire tax form was flat tax, and it was literally a postage stamp. And then Jerry Brown proved that you could actually elevate the free people in poverty won't have to pay taxes, and the IRS would be so much smaller if we just had a flat tax like Hong Kong does.
Yeah,
You know?
people have proposed that. Many politicians have proposed that over the years, a flat tax. But your side always complains
Well,
that
it's
it's
horribly unfair.
It's regressive.
It is regressive.
Yeah.
Mark, thank you for an
Why is
excellent
it
call,
regressive?
though. I'm not telling you. So here's an anonymous texter. Tips in the Catskills, Jim, were taxed? Maybe yes. Maybe no.
Here's a good one from Rhode
That's
Island.
Mark, thanks for the call.
Thank you, Mark.
What is it?
Anonymous from Rhode Island. If you're not cheating, you're not trying.
Well, that's not even nice.
And then another texter says, Jim, well, I believe Marjorie. I have to admit your statements are suspect.
No, it's because people, how they feel about me. They think that I'm a little less honorable
you're
than you
a
are.
suspect guy.
Well, whatever.
And they may have a point
Now,
there.
I cannot say the name of this person, but the person texted and said it's a prominent person in town. Let's put it that way. So don't ask me who it is.
Only prominent people text
In
Jim.
this person's opinion, the new music, you know what the word is this person uses? A verb. Sucks.
Okay, we don't give a crap about your opinion.
Exactly. Well, this person we do. And that the old music, this is a very interesting analysis, provided a predictability we all needed in our lives.
Well, some people
That
have
is a
said
very
that.
good point.
But this is a very fraught time. We
It is
shouldn't
fraught.
be changing the
It's
music
fraught.
in this crisis. It
Very
was
fraught.
comfort. But, it's too late now. I guess we're going to be arrested, Jim, and I don't want to be deported.
Now, let me ask you something. Before we get to calls, I mean this sincerely. Think about this. I know you don't know, so don't say I don't know, because I know you don't know. What percentage of people do you think cheat on their taxes? Really?
Very few.
Are you out of your mind?
Didn't they say
No.
the average is something like 84% who do
No,
not?
you didn't listen to what I said.
Okay.
That's an IRS survey of
okay.
taxpayers.
All right.
Who's dumb enough to tell the IRS, yeah, I think you should cheat on your taxes? You don't think at least 50% of the people...
I don't know.
Yes. Well, I said you can't say you don't know.
Well, what do you think?
I'd say at least 50%
You think so?
cheat on their taxes. So that would mean one of the two of us, the odds are, would probably do that if I were right, and... It ain't me.
Texter says, not too thrilled about the music, but if Jim wants to do my taxes, I will say the new music is fabulous.
Sarah and Newton, you're next on Boston Public Radio. Thank you much for calling. Hi.
Hi. I probably sound really angry because I am.
Good.
I believed in taxes, and I'm self-employed.
Yeah.
And often I would get paid in cash and still report everything, even if I didn't get a 1099. Wow. But now that our tax money is going to deporting people and torturing people and suppressing our rights and a gazillion lawsuits because of all of the illegal activity by our administration, I would cheat on my taxes in a second. Sorry, I sound so angry.
Would or
I am.
will?
I'm really angry.
Would or will?
I would if I would not get caught.
Well, see, I think...
But before, I never would, even if on principle. Now, on principle, I would, but I don't want to go to jail.
First of all,
But yes,
I think your anger is totally appropriate. And secondly, I think the vast majority of people whom I know feel like you do, not only angry, but if they felt that they could get away with it as to make a statement, they realistically would. Sarah, thanks for your honest phone call. In a moment of seriousness here, during the 1-minute break in between segments, I'm watching a CNN recap of the meeting between the president of El Salvador and Trump and his staff. It's disgraceful. This is being done in our name. The Justice Department lawyer, who was subsequently suspended after 15 years of service,
told the truth.
admitted that they
Yep.
deported Abrego Garcia, the guy from Maryland, the father and husband from Maryland, by mistake. They allowed Bukele, the president of El Salvador, to call him a terrorist twice when the Justice Department and the Attorney General was sitting right there, knew that not to be true. And they consciously decided make no effort to get a minimum, a non-criminal who they mistakenly deported out of one of the most savage jails in the world.
Think how cruel
That's
that
where our
is.
tax money is going
Yeah.
to.
the cruelty is just beyond the pale.
Because they care about nobody except themselves.
She's in Louisiana. She's in an ICE facility. She's got asthma. She has asthma attacks over and over again. That is very scary. Like, you can't breathe. You're going to choke to death. Like, we've talked about that before happening to people. And she talked about how cold it is. We can't give people blankets so that they're warm enough when they're sleeping at night. This is the United States of America. This is what we do to people.
Well, it's not only what we do to people, but it's the point that you made that I stole today, and we're talking to Nancy Gertner, with our tax dollars. That's why we're bringing this up. When Trump has an issue that he wants resolved, could they work if he wants it resolved quickly, the courts resolve it quickly. If he wants to slow it down, for example, like the issues that would have allowed the case in Washington around January 6th to have proceeded rapidly, they slow it down. Why is there not a decision yet on Ozturk? Why is there not a decision on the guy who graduated from Columbia?
Because we move like molasses around here. How long has that guy from Columbia been there? His baby's going to be born. He's not going to see it.
I'm sure it has been born, I assume. I don't know.
It just is, the whole thing is just enraging. I'm going to control myself.
Back to the music. Here's
back to music.
Anonymous texter. This is an idea that I know Marjorie would support at least. Here's an idea. Since it's clear you guys are too cheap to pay Bruce Springsteen and Spoon and Rat-a-Tat for the music, they're the ones behind the music, why don't you just fire Jamie and buy the music? Thank you. That's a little late, but thank you very much for
Okay, but here's a texter who says they actually like the new music.
Well, that's good.
I always wondered how you were able to use that song. Apparently you weren't. I love the new music. Wow.
Yeah.
Jim, do you deduct your dickies?
Yes, I do. 50. You're entitled to deduct 50% of your dickies on your taxes.
Mother is very upset. She said she and her husband have a combined income of less than $200,000 with 2 kids, and they still owe the feds more than $5,000. That's a lot, isn't it?
Yeah.
Maybe they didn't deduct enough.
Well, I assume they didn't.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, 5. I assume they mean after they've done the withholding, as
Yes.
Marjorie was suggesting. So they obviously on $200,000 paid a lot more money than $5,000. But you can have a good faith debate about whether or not you get from government what you pay for. I think that's a totally fair debate to have. Another fair debate to have is when your tax dollars are being used to abuse and people and break laws,
you know
which is what's happening right now.
I think following up on what Gertner said, although she did point out it would be illegal, people should look into this here in Massachusetts. We're a rich state. We give a lot of money to the feds.
Well, you know what we'll do before the governor is with us on the 25th? We'll find out what the differential is. How much more we send to Washington than we get back from Washington. If one of you guys could take that as a responsibility, that would be great. Eric in Worcester, thanks for your patience. Welcome to the show. We're talking about whether people cheat on their taxes. Welcome.
Yeah, so I will say this. I love doing my taxes. I do them early. We pay into them, but we're also really good about sort of overpaying it. So it's sort of it's an interest-free loan to the government. It's a way for us to, get money back kind of in full. But
when you say overpay, you mean excessive withholding is what you mean?
Correct.
Yeah, go ahead.
Correct. My big complaint, though, is more at the local level, which is, I live in Worcester, second biggest city in New England. Yep. And here, every year when taxes come up, people want the lowest possible tax rate allowable under state law. But at the same time, they want to complain constantly about the services in terms of potholes or roads or other things. And you can't have it both ways. We just had, multiple inches of snow out here, and people are complaining about snow removal, but they cut the snow removal budget by $500,000 in the last budget. It's just bonkers to me that people don't want to pay in, but they want high quality services.
Well, can I tell you something? By the way, I love you to be you were singing my tune here. The only, however, I would do, Eric, is those people who are in government, who believe in government. If you take away maybe Bernie Sanders and a few others, do a horrible job of educating the public about what they get for their tax dollars. A lot of people think, and this sounds like naive, what are the street lights? They have nothing to do with that.
Right.
The fire truck, that has nothing to do with us. We have to do a better job of letting people know what you already know.
But the
that was
problem
a fabulous call.
The problem is too, and I don't know enough about Worcester, but I know in a lot of towns, the property taxes are where most of the taxes come from.
Yeah,
and there's not enough businesses. There's not enough sharing of the burden.
But that's not his point.
Well, I think it's how we ended up a million years ago with Proposition 2.5, because you'd have homes that were worth like this is a long time ago, obviously, $15,000. People paying $3,000 and $4,000 in taxes a year. I mean, remember that was a big deal when I was a kid. And that's one of the problems. And especially when people get older, they're living in the houses they've lived in. And because real estate has gone up so much, their house is now worth $1 million and they bought it for $100,000. I mean, property taxes are a huge burden on people on fixed incomes.
I agree.
So it's a difficult balancing
That's one of the
act.
reasons why the state legislature, which actually did a good thing in this case, provided all this additional funding in the 90s. Revel was involved then for schools. To try to equalize things because poorer communities couldn't afford the same level of services.
Right. But
as
you
rich
see
ones.
the difference between a place like Needham, which has a lot of industrial base, and like Newton, which doesn't, or Brookline, which doesn't, and Boston.
Yeah, but Newton has a lot of very wealthy people who can afford to pay more. Chelsea does not. But a
lot of the people in Newton moved there years ago when you didn't have to pay that much money for
I don't
it.
think
That's
that's
my
true.
point.
Okay,
You don't think
it's not
that's
your
true?
point. No,
How do you know?
I do know. I've studied the history of Newton. By the way, do you know
no
my
idea.
PhD thesis was, in all seriousness, was on
Newton?
the end towns, all the end towns in Massachusetts.
Okay.
Can I read this damn thing?
Yeah, go
Our
ahead.
staff worked with lightning speed. This is Axios, February 2025. Massachusetts is the leader.
The
of
leader.
Only 13,
I knew
just
it.
said the leader.
I knew
is
it.
the leader of only 13 U.S. states that send more money to the feds than they receive. Listen to this. This is per capita. That means individuals. You listening to this show, you out there, send $4,846 more dollars to Washington than you get back.
There you go.
There you go.
And think about who you're sending it to. Stephen Miller
You're saying
and
Steve
Donald
Miller.
Trump.
He's cashing the check. And all the kids at Doge.
All the kids at
By
Doge.
the way, listen
Big
to this.
Balls is
New
getting
Jersey
your money.
is second, and it's $4,300, which is like 10% less than us. Almost $5,000 more we send to Washington than we get back from Washington. Why don't you do something about that? Why don't you
I'm
commentary
very
or do
excited
something?
about this idea. Why don't you can do a commentary tomorrow.
Maybe I
I'm
will.
a tax guy. I think this is a very exciting idea, which Judge Gertner mentioned. I hadn't even thought of it. That the blue states.
You know who might do it? Janet Mills up there in Maine. Janet Mills is the one who had the courage in not in the Oval Office, but in the White House to stand up to Trump and say, "We'll see you in court over the one trans athlete in all of Maine or something."
And by the way, the judge has postponed in her favor for the moment.
I know.
So that's really
so
good too.
we decided we searched for it because Marjorie I shouldn't say pretend, says publicly she hasn't cheated on her taxes. I say the same thing. We decided to balance it out and have Jared in. So why have you decided it was okay to cheat on your taxes?
Well, because nobody's looking anymore.
That's right. That's right. They fired all those people at the IRS.
Yeah.
They're all gone.
No, why am I not thinking?
You just put it into the mailbox and it just fell into a manhole cover thing.
That's
What do you think of our new idea, though? It's not our idea. It was Judge Gertner's idea.
No, she was
wasn't her
careful about
idea
it, yeah.
because she said it's illegal. But since Massachusetts and other blue states that are being targeted by President Trump, he's not targeting Kentucky and Alabama. He's targeting us and California and the blue states, city of Chicago and stuff. If those blue states say, "Hey, you're not going to give us any money. We're not going to give you all our money because it's the blue states that fund this corrupt operation."
That's a very clever idea.
Isn't that a clever idea?
Obviously, he doesn't support
Just for
it.
the record, if there is one IRS agent left, I did not cheat on my taxes.
Everybody's got to say that. Everybody makes that.
Okay, Jared.
Before you talk about whatever that is on your show there, what do you think of the new music on our show?
I think you should have called John Davidson to write music for you.
Why didn't we? We love John Davidson.
I don't know. Why didn't you?
Tom Rush.
Can we hear? Do you have Jared's theme? Because I'm not crazy about that.
I love our theme. We as a team
How come you're not getting
landed
sued?
because we followed the rules. And
Look
we
at
didn't,
Marjorie dancing.
right? Isn't it fun music?
That's great.
We spent a lot of time choosing our music.
Really?
It's fun. That's why we wanted to be upbeat, happy. We're dancing.
It sounds like a quiz show.
Okay, turn it off. Turn
like
it off.
Dick Clark time.
That's
Yeah.
enough of that already. Okay. That's really sad. What are you doing on the show with that horrible music?
I like
Go ahead.
having dance time with Marjorie.
Okay, go ahead. Okay.
It's great.
We're talking to David Grann, author of Killers of the Flower Moon
Oh,
and
gosh.
Major
Oh, good
and
for
New
you.
Yorker writer. He's among the literary lights being honored by the Associates of the Boston Public Library this year. So we'll talk
You've
about.
been the MC of that like a million times.
I have been the MC.
It's a big night.
And it celebrates the special collections at the Boston Public Library. But he's going to talk about his writing these great these great books, the adaptations, and just the intense research methods he employs, traveling all over the world. We're also speaking about a David Lynch tribute at the Somerville Theater, which is going to be very immersive. The costume contest, food, and then, of course, screenings of his films. And then Daniel Mendelsohn will join us about his new translation of Homer's Odyssey, where he has labored to get as close to the poem as possible.
What a show.
It is a show.
That is a hell of a show. The music's not that good, but the show sounds fabulous.
And we have a dance party right here, right after. Marjorie's coming back.
That's
Jared,
right.
good to see you.
Good to see
I
you.
have the white girls overbite.
Okay, Marjorie, can we get this over with?
I do the
Thank
white
you.
boys overbite.
Good to see you. Fine.
Thank you very much,
Bye.
Jared.
That's Jared Bowen.
You've
He's
been
got his
listening to
own
another
show
edition
coming
of
up.
Boston Public Radio. We very much appreciate that
We
you've
do.
listened to us, and even though everybody criticized our music, we're going to keep trying here.
Oh, wait, I'm supposed to explain this. Jamie reached out to Springsteen about our copyright situation, and Bruce apparently generously offered to write a brand new song inspired by BPR. Uses his song We Take Care of Our Own for the last 12 years we've been on the air. So you're going to hear that as Marjorie is attempting to close the show.
What's trending? What's interesting? What's going on around town? We're talking all things arts and culture on The Culture Show, next on GBH 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you.
And Bridgewater State University, helping create jobs for Massachusetts. BSU's skilled graduates are recruited by today's industry leaders, elevating business in Boston.